Dex woke up to the sound of someone crying. It was a sound he had become accustomed to listening for, and he lifted his head to find the source. The little kids in the gang were always waking up crying. They had dreams about the stepdad with amorous fingers, the uncle who liked to hit, the mother who left bruises, and they came awake yelling and crying. Only Dex could soothe them back to sleep, it seemed. Wizard wasn't as good with the little kids. Wizard wasn't as... Dex grimaced as he rubbed his head, remembering his own bad dream. Wizard had smiled at him before falling over dead in the street. It had been a dream. No way that some greaseball had killed the Wiz on his own turf. It had all been a dream, just nerves over the job today. It was all the more believable now that he was hearing some little kid crying in the night, looking for a mommy who wasn't there. He could almost believe it, if it wasn't for waking up in an unknown sterile hell where he found himself. The room was like a bunk room, some kind of mental ward summer camp. There were 15 beds, all lined up neatly in a row, and all but one of them was occupied. Beside the empty one was a girl who looked like she couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. She was so small that Dex wondered how she had got into this program at all. The second he thought it, he wondered why he had thought it. Was this a program? If so, how had he gotten in for that matter? "Mama? Mama?" the little girl was yelling, looking for her mother as if she expected her to just appear. Dex was going to her before he could think better of it. She turned slowly as he loomed over her. She was getting that look that privileged kids got when they see someone as large and black as Dex must seem to her, and he tried to soften his face so he didn't scare her any worse than she already was. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Are you okay?" "No," said the little girl. "I'm afraid. I fell asleep on the plane, and now I'm here, and I don't even know where here is." Dex nodded, mentally reassigning this from summer camp to snatch job hideout. Suddenly and unthinkably, the little girl pressed her wet face against his stomach and wrapped her arms around him. It caught Dex by surprise because it was not the sort of thing that happened very often to him. He'd been hugged before. Social workers did it often enough to try to get your trust, but it wasn't often that someone just came up and hugged you out of the blue like that. Most of the kids in his gang were too broken for physical contact to come easily, and Dex had counted himself amongst them. He found that he didn't mind being hugged, though, and he patted her back as he tried to get her to calm down. "Not to break up your little moment," said a snide voice from the left, "but if you could keep it down, that would be great." Dex turned to find a girl with ash blonde hair looking at him from beneath a plastic hospital pillow. What he could see of her face would have been considered attractive, he supposed, and she had that waifish look that some of the older girls on the street had. She seemed too young for it, but Dex had seen younger girls trying to cultivate it. When you were underage and hungry without a home to go to, sometimes you ended up doing some things you weren't proud of the next day. This girl, however, looked like she wouldn't know much about that kind of life. "Sorry," Dex said as he continued to pat the smaller girl. "Know where we are?" The blonde girl rolled her eyes. "Well, duh. It's the School for the Gifted at Ohio State. You must be lost. I didn't know they had a special ed program." Dex started to give her something back, something a little less genial, but the little girl took her face away from his stomach long enough to blubber out that she was wrong. "We're in the California Research Institute for the Gifted. Don't you know anything?" The blonde girl was sitting up now, and Dex could tell that she was around the same age that he was. She was dressed in a light pair of pajamas, something you might get in a hospital sleep study, and she was smiling. It never touched her eyes, though, and they were arctic. Wherever she was from, it was pretty clear that she didn't suffer being spoken to like that by girls as small as this. I don't know what line of horseshit they fed you, princess, but they told my father that they were taking me to Ohio State. Daddy would have never agreed for anyone to take me out of state, not in a million years. You don't know anything, and your daddy is a... But the little girl put a hand over her mouth before burying her face against Dex's stomach again. Dex lifted an eyebrow, wondering what she had been about to say, and turning back to the blonde who was staring daggers at the kid. She's just scared. Don't take it personal. The older girl flipped her hair in a dismissive way, as if it was nothing to her. Dex had gotten pretty good at reading people, though, and realized he'd have to keep an eye on the little girl, at least if he meant for her to be safe here. My name's Dex, and I'm still not quite sure where we are. I never did get a rundown from anyone before they picked me up. Or had he? You aren't the one we want, kid, but you'll do. Had that been from the dream? Dex was starting to wonder if it had been a dream at all. Yeah, I don't remember asking, said the haughty girl with the blonde hair. She flopped over on her side, turning away from them as she pretended to go back to sleep, but Dex wasn't fooled. He had seen better acting on the soap operas at the group homes. He turned back to the little girl, the one who seemed to have adopted him in that way that little kids do sometimes, and quietly guided her back to his bed. She might have to fight the blonde with the cold eyes at some point, but it wouldn't be today. Dex asked her if she'd like to sit on the bed with him, and she nodded against his stomach. She was wearing the same pajamas the girl had been wearing, and that was the first time he realized that he was too. All the kids seemed to be in the same sterile white tunic with crisp edges and straight white pants with a blue line down the leg. He wondered who had dressed him. He also wondered where his clothes were, though it was something he realized might be less important. The girl pulled her face away from his stomach, and he tried not to wince as a runner of snot came along with her. "Thank you," she said soupily through a nose full of muck. "I think that girl would have liked to hurt me after you left." Dex lifted her onto his bed and found that she weighed less than he'd thought. She must be even younger than he had suspected. I'd thought that might be what she was thinking. When you live on the streets as long as I did, you get a pretty good feel for what people want and what they mean to do. The little girl smiled and wiped her nose. She had a good smile, and it broke through her sadness like a sunrise. "I'm Masha," she said, without being prompted. "Masha, that's a nice name. I'm Dex." She nodded. "Short for Dexter, but nobody calls you that." Dex nodded before he could think better of it, not stopping to ask how she could have known such a thing. They sat and talked in that semi-dark bunk room for what felt like no time at all. Masha told Dex about her home and her family, telling him about the things she could do as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Dex mostly listened, telling her things about the street towards the end when she had run into things to talk about. He told her about the little kids in his gang that he took care of, about Smoke and the interesting thing that he could do. He started to talk about Wizard, but it made his throat tight to talk about the boy. Dex didn't understand why, probably something to do with the dream he had had, but he stopped suddenly midway through as the tears came to make an appearance as they welled up in his eyes. "What about you, Dexter?" Dex laughed as he wiped his eyes. "Call me Dex, little sister. No one calls me Dexter, not since I stopped going to the social service building." "Okay," she said, with a watery smile. "What do you do, Dex?" Dex tapped the side of his head and winked. "I call it the brain blast. I don't actually know what it does, but it seems to reset people sometimes, or just push them over other times. It's like a blast of energy, and when it hits people, they leave me alone." "You're a telekinetic," she said with sudden excitement. Dex furrowed his eyebrows in confusion. "What's that?" "Someone who can move things with their mind." He laughed again and couldn't remember a time that he had laughed quite this much. "I guess so. My friends and I always used to read the X-Men comics, and Wizard said what I had was like Charles Xavier when he would move things with his mind. He said mine was more like a gun than a hand, though. He would..." But Dex stopped talking again as his eyes got wet for no reason. He wiped at them, not sure why he was doing it, and when he looked down at Masha, he found that she was crying too. They killed your friend, didn't they? Dex opened his mouth to deny it, but he couldn't. How could you know that? I wasn't even sure I knew it. I'm still not sure I know it. Masha looked around, trying to see if anyone was listening. She leaned in close, having to stand up so she could whisper in his ear, and Dex leaned closer too. Can you keep a secret? Dex nodded before he could think better of it. If this was a place like he thought it was, secrets could be very dangerous. Sometimes, when I really concentrate, I can hear people's thoughts. She whispered it, like she was afraid it was some dark secret, and when she sat back down, she looked at Dex as if pleading with him not to tell anyone. He mimed locking his mouth up and throwing away the key, and that made her giggle. Dex found that he liked this little girl, despite himself. He had always taken care of the little kids in his gang, out of a sense of obligation. He was bigger and they were littler. That meant that they needed him, but it wasn't like that with Masha. When he talked with Masha, it was like talking with Wizard. It just seemed natural. "Hey," came a voice from behind them, and as Dex turned to look at the speaker, he found himself putting a protective arm around Masha. He turned to find a skinny white kid in the same no-color pajamas, a kid who looked like he might know a thing or two about living rough. "Oh, didn't want any trouble," he said, putting on a dopey smile as he put his hands up. "I'm Dunstan. I'm just wondering if either of you know where we are." Dex relaxed a little. This one clearly wasn't another one like the blonde girl. "I'm Dex. This is Masha." "No, neither of us know where we are either." Dunstan nodded, coming around the bed to stand before them. Dex saw that he was trying to be approachable, the way people did when they wanted to be friends or just to get close so they could get in the first lick. But something seemed off about him too. Dex couldn't put his finger on it, but the longer he watched him, the closer he got to it. Dunstan kept his hands behind his head, fingers in his hair as if protecting them. The kid was probably a germaphobe, Dex thought, and made note not to pat him if they ended up being tight. "Great," Dunstan said, drawing it out. "I knew I should have taken up that last family on their offer for cohabitation. Might have saved me from the organ farm." Dex furrowed his brow, wanting to tell him not to say things like that, or he might scare the kid, but when he looked down at Masha, she was unfazed. Quite the contrary, she was spellbound. "What's your superpower, Dunstan?" she suddenly asked, leaning forward. Dunstan looked a little shocked, but he hit it well. "Who says I have?" "'Cause we all do," Dex said, grinning as he rolled his eyes. "Kinda seems like why we might all be here." Dunstan let out a breath, and it sounded distinctively horse-like. "Always gets me in trouble." Some of the other kids were starting to stir now, and Dex saw that many of them were in equally sorry states. They were confused, scared, angry, and not really sure what to make of their newfound situation. Little conversations were beginning to pop up, many with varying volumes, and Dex noticed that Dunstan was sticking close to them. Gangs were already forming, unlikely allies binding together, and it seemed that he meant to stay near them lest he be forced to make a similar introduction again. Dex found that he didn't really mind. There came a sudden loud whistling from the front of the room, and they all looked up to see a large, bald man with a jack-o'-lantern smile standing in the doorway. By the way Masha tensed, she must have recognized him. "Rise and shine, snot babbies. Welcome to kindergarten. I assume you all have lots of questions and concerns, but I'm not here to answer those. I'm here to get you to the calf so you can eat some slop and hopefully sit still while I try to explain this little situation to you. So, line up and follow me. Don't break off on your own, and don't get lost. There are bigger monsters than me in these halls, and you wouldn't want to get gobbled up." "I doubt it," Masha whispered as the kids started moving agreeably towards the man. Dex got up too, taking her hand, but she stayed put. "Come on, little sis. I'll protect you from the big scary man." "Me too," Dunstan said, offering her a hand which Dex was surprised to find that she took. Dunstan grimaced a little as he touched her, but he hit it well, and Dex thought his superpower might have something to do with physical contact. Masha must have picked up on some of that too, but when she tried to let go, he covered her hand with his slightly tanner one. "Don't worry, kid. Your memories are like milquetoast next to what I've seen." The three proceeded to the line, taking up the rear, and went to their first day of kindergarten, a little cluster of soft, worried voices. "No," Security Chief Ridley said, for about the 10th time. Janice sighed, clearly unhappy. "You let the dwarf teach them, and you know he has history with the girl. My field of study," she started again, but Ridley put up a hand. "Is known to me, Jan. Who do you think authorized the taxpayers to fund your little study in child psychology?" Janice bit her lip. She had known, of course she had known, but she had to try. Most of the washouts had degrees in child psychiatry or child rearing or the mentality of gifted pupils, which was a special course not found in the usual booklets. They were all the same, though. The site was teaching them to be effective snatchers or minders. When you knew what a kid was thinking, it was easy to grab them, easy to watch them, easy to teach them, so you knew who was going to graduate and who would be the next generations of snatchers and minders. Janice was one of the best snatchers. Female snatchers always were, if they had the sand for it. Something about an unimposing woman asking for help put kids at ease sometimes, and God knew you needed it when some of your targets could blow your head up with a thought or make you think you were an eggplant. Janice, however, wanted to transition into minding, but Ridley knew why. "Did Wheeler tell you?" she asked. Ridley smiled, and it almost made him look human. It actually made him look like a particularly ghastly muppet, but she would never say as much. Ridley was old, but it had done nothing to slow him down. His skin was waxy, like an overripe fruit, and it made the scars on his face and arms stand out in terrible contrast, wax running through silver. What hair he had left was scooped over his craggy skull like a board over a pothole. He was rail thin, a corpse in a blue suit, but Janice found that she couldn't look at him for more than a few seconds without feeling a mixture of fear and loathing. No matter how old she got, he was still the goblin that haunted her dreams and her nightmares. "He didn't have to. I knew you'd eventually stumble across him again." Janice must have looked surprised, because he laughed in a way that seemed rich for his deformed mouth. You think we didn't know? Most of you washouts don't take a dump without us knowing the size and color. We knew you'd popped a kid out, but we didn't expect you to push him out like a cat in the clean linen. You really threw us off with your little rebellious stunt, but we have that in hand now." He leaned forward, the mild fluorescence of his office casting a ghostly glow across his face. "So, that just leaves the father. I really hope you weren't dumb enough to sleep with another washout and father another child. You remember what happened last time." Once, she would have looked away and made herself look guilty, but Janice wasn't a little girl anymore, and she had something worth fighting for. "No, he was just a guy, someone I met at a frat party. I don't even remember his name now." He stared at her a little bit, looking into her soul, before nodding and sitting back in his chair. "For your sake, I really hope so." She sighed in relief. "So, the answer is still no. We have enough teachers for this class. What I really need is intel on the next class, and you and Wheeler make a pretty good team when you're not screwing like rabbits." She held back the tears. She wouldn't cry in front of him. Never again. He slid a sheet of paper across to her. "Get going. Your flight leaves in an hour. Go get Wheeler. I think he's still in your bed. If you hurry, he might even get a shower before takeoff." She left then, taking the paper with her, as she left to do Ridley's bidding, as usual. "Why are you following me?" the girl asked. Gerald kept his eyes forward, following the line as they went to, well, wherever it was they were going. "I said, why are you following me?" she asked, her voice pitched low. Gerald looked at the girl and glanced down at the blue string coming from her navel. How did she not see it? How could she not know that she was safety to him? How did any of them not know, he thought again, as he had thought many times before. When he woke up in that sterile place, Gerald's first memory was of seeing the string. Gerald had always seen the strings, and when he saw one pointing towards the sleeping girl, he had made her his target. As the children started to rise, he had gravitated towards her, following the string, like the arrow on a GPS. It was familiar, so now he found himself doing it without question. "Are you going to say something? Or am I to assume that you're some kind of mute?" Gerald was at a bit of a loss, but he pushed forward. "I was just looking for someone who looked like they needed a friend." The girl scoffed. "So it's friendship, then? Because if you're hoping for more, you should know it's not going to happen." Gerald was a little stunned by her brashness, but he tried not to let it put him off. "Everyone's grouping up already. We might as well find some friends while we still can." He realized after he said it that it sounded a little cryptic, but she was looking around and realizing the same thing. Despite the fact that they were scared, despite the fact that they were in a strange place with strange people, the other kids had already begun to form cliques and peer groups, like they would in any typical schoolyard. Like it or not, a place like this would be very lonely and dangerous for someone on their own, and Gerald was glad to see that she had come to the same conclusion. "All right," she said hesitantly, keeping her voice low, "but if you turn out to be a weirdo, I'm going to drop you like a bad habit." They were coming through the sterile corridor, wherever they were, and Gerald thought they might be underground somewhere. That'd make sense if you were going to kidnap a bunch of kids, especially if they were all American children, which he guessed by the amount of English being whispered behind him. Then you would need to put them somewhere where they couldn't make a lot of fuss and draw attention to themselves. He supposed it must be the government, or one of those shadow governments that Alex Jones was always talking about, while his dad sat stoned and watched him. Alex Jones seemed to be his father's favorite news anchor when he was all done up on meth and dozing in his easy chair. His dad would nod along like the screaming man on the TV was making a lot of sense, and he supposed it was easy to believe, given the current political climate. These days, CNN looked more like the soap operas that his mother had watched, and he supposed it was comforting to think that some intelligent shadow government was actually pulling the strings, rather than whatever bad actor was in the White House this cycle. "I'm Gerald," he whispered to her. She didn't answer right away, and he thought she might not when she finally leaned back and whispered, "Rebecca." "I'd say it's nice to meet you, Gerald, but it's not." Gerald nodded. Given the circumstances, he understood. They led the 15 or so confused and terrified kids into the last place they had expected to find themselves, a cafeteria. It gleamed at them as they came in, the floor immaculately polished, the 3 serving people there aproned and hairnetted as you would expect in any school cafeteria. They waited patiently as the kids filed in, and when the big man turned to cast his hands towards the line, like some exuberant game show host showing off the prizes, Gerald supposed the organization had to have some sense. Children fed were children controlled, after all. "It's breakfast time, so go ahead and get your meals before we begin your orientation." 13 of them lined up, though Gerald noticed 2 of them broke off and went to sit at the long tables provided. As he took up his tray, he saw the man observing them, his smile still pasted on, but he didn't seem to be correcting them. Gerald supposed it didn't really matter if they were fed or not. They would eat when they were hungry, or they would waste away. His mother had always tried to ensure that he had enough to eat when she wasn't floating in a drunken stupor, but his dad was completely okay to let him sit there all day and be forgotten about. At the end of the day, Gerald reflected, as they loaded his tray with scrambled eggs and sausage, this place would get more kids, if they, the students, failed to live up to expectation. In the end, there would always be more kids, special or not, for whatever they were doing here. As the children sat and began talking quietly amongst themselves, a door at the back of the stage opened up, and out walked a small group of people in doctor's clothes and white coats. He was sitting next to Rebecca when some of them noticed the little person, who took a slightly smaller seat, and she stiffened when she saw him. She was clutching her plastic fork so hard that he thought she might break it, and he didn't have to wonder if she knew the man or not. The large, grinning man proceeded over all, and as he swept his eyes across them, they all became silent, as if by magic. "Welcome to the kindergarten. I'm Mr. Cutter, the head minder for this class. You can tell this," he said, as he brought his hands up to indicate the dark red clothes he wore, "by my scrubs. All minders will wear this color, and it's our job to keep the peace between you little brats. In this place, we are the eyes and ears of Security Chief Ridley, and you better hope you never have to meet him. You will notice that some of those assembled are dressed in blue scrubs. Those are members of the testing team. Think of them as your teachers, because they are here to conduct class. You will listen to them. You will do as they say, or you will be punished. Punishments may be as minor as not being allowed in the day room, going to bed without a meal, or being confined to your bunks for the day. Punishments may also be as severe, though," he said, reaching towards his belt and taking out something that Gerald had thought was a flashlight, "as a beating or a smack with one of these." He pressed a button on the side of the baton, and a bolt of electricity crackled across the tip. Many of the kids flinched away from the light show, and the man's grin got even wider. This was a man, Gerald thought, who enjoyed causing discomfort. "Trust me when I say you don't want to get zapped by one of these. Corporal punishment, however, is not our priority here. You kids are here to learn how you, too, can serve your country in the war against her enemies. We train you children so you can be our first line of defense against whatever may come in the future. Study hard, work hard, and all of you can be of some use to your country." Gerald still saw much of the fear that had been present when the man had turned on the shock stick, but he was surprised at how many of them looked proud at what the guy was saying. The idea of serving their country clearly appealed to many of them, but Gerald was a little too pragmatic to feel anything but mistrust. The words sounded hollow to him, the carrot after the stick, and he wasn't about to catch Stockholm that easily. These men had grabbed him up off the side of the road, and though they had saved him in their own way, he knew that it had not been their intention. One look at Rebecca showed that she felt the same, though he thought it might be for different reasons. Her eyes were still fixed hatefully on the small man sitting on the stage, like an out-of-place toddler, and it was clear that she had more than misgivings where he was concerned. "So, enjoy your breakfast, and take today to explore your new home. If you have any questions, feel free to come talk to me or any of my staff. You may also see people in black scrubs walking around, and I ask you not to bother them. These are the custodians, and they are hard at work, keeping your pig pen clean so you have somewhere to wallow. I'll shut up now. I'm sure my voice is terrible for digestion. I'll see you all at breakfast tomorrow, for that is when class will truly begin." He exited the stage then, and the talk became low and inquisitive as the kids discussed their fears and their excitements. As children often do, they feared the stick, but longed for the carrot. The guy on the stage would realize this, and Gerald thought he probably could have taught a class on motivation. Not the motivation you teach to businessmen, or even to adults, but the kind you teach to school kids, or those who aren't particularly smart. The kind of encouragement where you're allowed to hit people when they don't do what you want them to do. The kind of motivation that often comes with chains. I want to go home, Rachel said, and Gerald realized that she was crying into her scrambled eggs. I don't understand. Why am I here? It's not fair. Gerald had covered his hand with hers before he could stop himself, and when she looked tearfully at him, he favored her with a smile. It rarely is, was all he could find to say. You know, as weird as it is to be the subject of a crime show, this place is pretty cool, Dunstan said as they walked around. Dex had read a book when he was little, the Disney picture book about the movie Pinocchio, and he remembered the place that Lampwick had taken the little puppet to before he'd turned into a jackass. Pleasure Island had seemed really nice, a real heaven on earth, right up until they had shipped the donkey children off to the salt mines. Dex wondered where the salt mines were in this place, because he knew there had to be one. There was a game room full of old arcade games, Pac-Man and Galaga, and other stuff Dex had sometimes seen through the windows of the old arcade. There was a TV in there, a big flat-screen one, and the box attached to it gave it more channels than Dex had ever dreamed of. Some of the kids he saw in there had been complaining about the lack of anything to watch, and Dex could tell that these were kids who had never had to fight for TV time in the halfway house or the new foster home. Dunstan understood that too, which was pretty clear, but Masha hadn't shown a lot of interest in anything in the game room. She mostly just stuck close to Dex and tried to look small. She'd have to get over that, Dex knew, if she wanted to survive around here. So, Dunstan, Dex said as they came around and found the door to the outside. How long were you in the system? Dunstan looked at him like he might be a mind reader too, but Dex just grinned and Masha broke ranks and headed for the double doors to the playground. It wasn't really the outside, but the walls of the room looked like a schoolyard, and the lights were hot enough to make you think they might be UV or something. There was a big play structure, a kickball field, even a swimming pool. Dex looked at all that water greedily. How long had it been since he'd been in a pool? He couldn't swim very well. Swimming wasn't something you did a lot of when you were living rough, but he could swim pretty okay. If he looked at that footlocker near his bed, he thought he might find a bathing suit in there. As Masha ran to the playground, a kid a little older than her approaching to play with her, Dunstan took a seat next to Dex on a nearby bench. The sun was nice, but Dex knew he would be hungry for some real sun pretty soon. So how'd you know I was in the system? Dunstan asked. Are you a brain like her? Nah, Dex said with a chuckle. I just know the look. If you'd lived in my city, I'd have probably recruited you to my gang, the Weird Boys. Me, Smoke, and Wizard were all special. Kinda like her and you. Smoke could be unseen, if he stood still enough, and Wizard could mess up technology and then fix it again sometimes. I've got the brain blast that kinda stuns people. It did more than that sometimes, but Dex didn't think Dunstan needed to know that. Sounds pretty cool, Dunstan said, looking up at Masha as she screamed, but turned out to be delight rather than one of pain. I had some friends at the group home, but they weren't like me. They were just regular kids. I'm surprised this place didn't want all you guys. I guess they did, Dex said, his smile slipping a little, but there was an incident. I don't think I was supposed to be here at all, Dunstan. I think I was the silver medal in all this. He tried to think about it, but it hurt him. I think Wizard was the one they really wanted. I remember a little bit about what happened, and I'm pretty sure Wizard got killed that night while we were making a break for it. Damn, Dunstan said. That's rough. Did you... He seemed to be weighing his words. Did you see it happen? Dex shook his head, but didn't stop the tears from coming back. I don't know. I think I did, but I did something after that, and it kinda got foggy. I think I brain blasted too hard, and maybe I injured myself. I don't know, but I do remember that Wizard's dead, and I'm here. Dunstan looked down at his feet. I've never seen anybody die before. He hesitated, feeling it was time to share, but not sure where to begin. You didn't just take a secret like that and not share one of your own. It's all right, Dex said, wiping his eyes before Masha could see. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. It's nothing concrete, Dunstan said, but I think the lady who abducted me was my mom. Dex looked at him oddly. What, like she was just coming to get you? No, Dunstan said slowly. Not like that. I don't think she knew who I was until I touched her. That's how it works, I think. I told you guys that, right? Dex nodded, looking up as a group of kids came into the playground. Well, when I touched her, it was like she saw what I was seeing. I think some of the people who abduct us used to be like us. She had powers, but she doesn't anymore. She remembers having powers, remembers leaving me on the doorstep of a fire station, and then I felt something as we touched. It was like her power was calling out to mine. Dex shook his head, looking at the group as they went to talk to Masha and her new friend. That's messed up, man. I can't believe your own mom would do something like that to you, that she would bring you to a place like this. Yeah, well, it's not like she's really my mom or anything. She left me to get back to work. It's not like I mean that much to her. Dex felt like he wanted to say more, but Masha called to them and asked if they wanted to play kickball with the group that had arrived. Dex looked up at Dunstan. Feel like kicking a little ball with these kids? When Dunstan looked up, the grin he'd worn most of the day was back in place. Hell yeah, let's teach these kids a little something about chasing rubber balls. They went to the field, following behind a cluster of younger kids, and enjoyed a few hours of kicking a ball as hard as they could. It was cathartic, somehow. So Gerald, Rebecca said, looking at him from the side of the Oz book that she'd been pretending to read for the past half hour. What do you make of all this? Gerald didn't glance up from the Sherlock Holmes mystery he'd been reading, but she knew he had heard her. Honestly, I think we're lab rats in a really nice cage. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Well, obviously, but what do you make of it? The odd boy just shrugged again, and Rebecca could have gladly smacked him with the book she was reading. He insisted on following her as they explored, telling her that it was better to explore in groups, and they found the game room, the playground, and then the library. It was huge, and Rebecca thought they might have everything ever printed. It was 2 floors of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and she'd found everything from Game of Thrones to Grapes of Wrath here. It was all organized in neat rows of information, everything in its proper place, and Rebecca could have gladly spent a few hours here without complaints. Gerald was right, though. This was just a nice cage for the rats to run in, and the rats only ran until it was time for the test to begin. What I mean is, how do you think we get out of here? Gerald flipped a page, his eyes roaming over the words, which made her think he might actually be reading. We don't, he said matter-of-factly. Not until they let us out. Rebecca sighed in disgust. As far as friends went, Gerald left a lot to be desired. Why would you want to, anyway? Gerald asked, eyes glued to the book. Why wouldn't you want to? She challenged. You're being held here against your will by people you don't know. You call us lab rats, and that may not be far off, but that means we're only here till they finish experimenting on us. What if that kills us? What if it does worse than kill us? How are you so calm? The last earned her an angry shh from the librarian in the red scrubs, and Rebecca looked down at her book again. Rebecca, do you know why you're here? She shook her head, and Gerald turned another page. Neither do I, but I know what's waiting for me where I came from. I came from a home with an alcoholic mother and an abusive father who makes and uses drugs. The prospect of becoming like both of them makes me think it might be better to die here. You say they might kill us here. Well, if I'd stayed at home, that might is a certainty. My dad would have killed me. It was only a matter of time. Here, however, I might manage to get out alive." Rebecca gave him a weird look. "I never understand how to talk to you. It's not even like talking to another kid." "I had to grow up pretty fast," Gerald said, glancing down at the string between them. It was still blue, but every now and again it would throb red like an angry tooth. He didn't like that, but it was better than it could be. Rebecca was clearly considering leading him into something dangerous, but he'd cross that bridge when the time came. Gerald had seen other strings today, some red, some orange, and a couple of green ones. He'd seen a blue one for just a moment as it stretched from a little group walking towards the playground, but it had only been for a moment. They might be important, or they might not be. Only time would tell. For the moment, he had a friend, and that was enough. "I'm suddenly feeling hungry," he said to Rebecca, and she looked at the clock and realized it was 6 p.m. Where had the day gone, she wondered. She was hungry too, and agreed easily as the two headed off. Tomorrow might bring tests, it might bring pain, but today was today, and Gerald could smell something wafting from the cafeteria that smelled better than the frozen dinners his family was likely eating, and that sounded fine to him. As they walked off, Gerald thought he could get used to living like this. Rebecca, however, worried that she would never find a way out. A tone sounded for 20 seconds at 9, and a voice called all of them to the cafeteria. Mr. Cutter was once again on stage, grinning like a maniac, and Masha remembered again the flash she had gotten when he was at her house. He had wanted to slap her, she knew that much. Now it seemed he might get a chance. "I do hope that all of you have enjoyed your exploration, but now it's time for bed. We ask that you return to your assigned beds. Your footlockers have your name on them, and only your thumbprint will open them, so don't bother swapping bunks. Your class schedule will be handed out tomorrow at breakfast, so your first class will start at 0800 hours. I would suggest you get some sleep, but if you'd rather attend class tired, then stay up as late as you want. Regardless, the doors to the activity rooms will be locked at 2100 every night. That includes the cafeteria. So off you go, and pleasant dreams." The students got up, some of them slower than others, and migrated back towards the dorms. Masha fell in with Dex and Dunstan, but she couldn't shake what he had said. Sleep in your own bed? Masha hadn't slept alone her whole life. She'd be too scared. As smart as she was still only 6. She was the youngest of the students, and as they got closer to the dorms, she lost some of the assuredness she had been dragging around throughout the day. Suddenly, she was very much a 6-year-old girl who wanted her Pooh Bear, her nightlight, and her mommy. Above all else, she wanted her mommy. "Dex," she asked, and he looked down at her almost expectantly. "Can I sleep with you?" Dex opened his mouth, but a catty peal of laughter sounded to his left. "Jesus, they start young here, don't they?" He turned to find the girl with the platinum blonde hair from earlier. Her attitude hadn't improved after 3 squares, and Dex suddenly remembered that look from earlier that day. Dex stood up a little straighter, trying not to let her get into his head, but he didn't trust her anywhere near Masha. Someone at one of the group homes he had been at had told someone else they had a puppy strangling look about them, and this girl had it in spades. "How about it, Dex?" she said, putting on some fake baby talk. "You want to sweep with a little girl?" Some of the girls around her laughed, but before Dex could respond, Dunstan saved him the trouble. "Dex, I thought we were keeping the sleepover a secret. It's invitation only anyway, so you can't come," he said, turning to the girl and shooing her away. She got red in the face, moving off with the 3 girls that she had surrounded herself with. Dunstan smiled down at Masha, and Dex couldn't help but grin too. It was infectious, it seemed, and when they got back to the dorm, Masha got her bedding and Dunstan grabbed his as they moved to set up around Dex's bunk. The lights didn't get low till around 2200, but as they softened, the party was just getting started. They sat up telling stories, all 3 of them laughing as Dex talked about a time he had tricked food out of a store for his family, or the time that Dunstan had encountered new friends at the group home. Masha mostly sat and listened, her eyes getting heavier and heavier as she basked in the love of her new friends. Dex had just looked up, seeing the digital clock showing 22:50, when Dunstan made a shh sound and pointed at Masha. She was snoring, curled up in her bedding like a cat in its basket, and Dunstan waved as he collected up his bedding and departed. Dex got under his own covers, letting Masha sleep as he turned in himself. They weathered the first night together, drawing strength from each other as each took comfort in the other. It appeared that Dex had traded one strange family for another, and the transition wasn't as odd as he would have thought. Helping the weak and the strange was something that Wizard could have gotten behind, and he thought that he would have probably done the same thing if he were here and Dex were dead. "New bunch of weird boys," Dex said with a yawn, drifting off to the sound of Masha asleep beside him. As the kids slept and snored, the specter of Ripley hung above them and watched. Whether they knew it or not, they were all flies in his web now. They were his to drain, to store, to sacrifice, and he would do all that was needed to see his goals achieved. As he watched them through the well-hidden cameras, he couldn't help but grin wickedly. 20 potential sparks, each of them looking to be the great flame I use to light our future. He didn't tire. Ripley didn't need sleep like others did, but he knew he would snatch a few hours before class tomorrow. He would want to watch the new students begin their education. For how? He asked no one in particular, the monitors lighting his eyes like the orbs of some god computer. Does the spider find the juiciest fly if he doesn't sit patiently and bide his time? Dunstan didn't think he had eaten quite this good in a long time. At the group home, they would be eating cold cereal or toast with peanut butter as they all tried to get out the door before the bus left. It was hard to get that many kids out the door on time, and Dunstan never could figure out how Mary made it happen. If there had been a big donation, and it was a weekend, you might get powdered eggs, or pancakes, or maybe Lego My Eggos with that fake butter that never seemed to spoil. As he sat there with Masha and Dex, munching happily like a pig at the trough, he realized what had been missing from his life all along. The sense of fullness, something he had never known, was like a warm blanket over his belly. And why shouldn't it be? He certainly had enough to get him there, and that was the real miracle here. When they had hit the line this morning, the people there had started putting food on their tray, and damn near didn't stop. There was grits, eggs, scrambled and over easy, toast with jam, bacon, sausage, pancakes, waffles, an omelet bar, donuts, something called crepes that were stuffed with some kind of chocolate spread that turned out to be better than breathing, and juice, coffee, water, tea, soda, whatever else you might want to drink. Dunstan had been putting it away like people might come and try to take it from him, and Dex was watching him with something like awe. "Done. Take it easy, bud. You're gonna hurt yourself." Dunstan couldn't help but notice that he'd loaded up too. Grits, eggs, 2 omelets, coffee, and the cup most people had juice in, but he supposed that Dex was making up for lost time. Dunstan had been despairing cold cereal and milk, but at least it was food. While he was rolling his eyes at Fruit Loops and Captain Crunch, Dex was out there searching for his daily bread, and probably going hungry as often as not. "Sorry," he said, wiping his mouth. We never got food like this at the group home." Masha looked up from her own food, eating eggs and bacon with a couple of little flapjacks slowly turning to mush under the syrup she'd put on them. "You guys didn't eat breakfast where you lived? But Mommy says it's the most important meal of the day." "We did," Dunstan assured her. "It was just never this nice." "I know what you mean," Dex said. "Last time I had scrambled eggs was when Wizard fixed up a hot plate he found in the trash and tried to cook eggs for breakfast. Turned out he had filched them from a bird nest, and they tasted terrible. They stuck to the hot plate, and eventually it just shorted out, and we ran off as it set on fire." Dex laughed, but the others were just looking at him oddly. He finally stopped, looking a little sheepish. I guess you'd have to be there. They ate a little more, the kids around them talking in low voices about the armbands that had been in their lockers this morning. So, what do you think they mean? Dunstan said, holding up a wrist with a blue armband on it. Dex looked at his. It was red, but it was hard to miss that Masha had a green band. He'd seen one kid with a black band, one kid with a white band, and a couple of kids with yellow bands, but most of the bands were either blue, green, or red. My working theory is that the blue means gifted, while the green means smarty pants, and red is for the muscle that get to carry us around. Masha giggled, and Dex just rolled his eyes at him, smiling despite himself. Maybe the red bands are the guys who get to kick the guys with the blue bands first, and if there's anything left of them, then the blue band guys get to have a go. Hey, what about me? Masha asked, scratching her head. You get to sit closest to the action since you're short, he said, ruffling her hair. They didn't seem to be the only ones talking about the armbands this morning, and everyone seemed to have a theory. Dunstan was trying not to listen, but it was hard with all the voices rising and falling around him. A couple of kids thought the red bands might be soldiers and the green bands might be doctors, and the blue bands were scientists. Others thought that it might be a power thing. Red and black was the most powerful, with the other colors being less powerful, white being the least. The girl, wearing the only white band, looked less than pleased with this, and when she smashed a chunk out of the table, the others stopped saying it quite so loudly. Some people thought the red bands might be for offensive users, while the green and the blue were for more subtle powers. Doesn't really do any good to speculate about it, Dunstan thought, even though he had kind of started it. They'll have to tell us eventually. He had barely started on his omelet when the man from yesterday, the one Masha called Cutter, took the stage again. He clapped his broad, scarred hands together, and the room was soon quiet, except for the sounds of those meaty hands coming together. Some of the kids joined in, clearly thinking it was some kind of game, but none of their group did. Masha had told them what she suspected about the man, and they all believed it. The guy was twice as big as any of the other minders, and he looked like he ripped phone books in half in his spare time, just for fun. "Is everyone enjoying their breakfast?" he asked, and you could tell who the less fortunate kids were, because they lifted their voices high. "Good, good. Well, it's almost time for class. When the clock behind me chimes, it will be 0800, and time for class to begin. You will notice that each of you has an armband. That's because all of you have unique abilities, but it's important that they are nurtured in just the right environment. So when it's time for class, follow the lighted path that matches your armband, so you get to the right class. If you go to the wrong class, don't worry, you'll be taken to the right one. Today's a grace day, but in the future, if you make a habit of going to the wrong class, you will get a demerit, and you don't want those. So finish up and make your way to your first class." Dunstan, Dex, and Masha looked at each other, sharing the same thoughts. They each had different armbands, so they wouldn't be in the same class. Masha looked a little weepy at this, but Dex patted her arm and smiled. "No tears, little sis. We'll see each other later. Shoot, there's only 22 of us. It's not like we can lose each other." Masha smiled a little wetly, swallowing her tears. "Right, that's right. I'll see you guys after class." Dunstan smiled too, but he'd noticed something that Dex hadn't yet, something that troubled him. Little Miss Blonde Bully from the night before also had a green armband, which meant she would have access to Masha without them there to protect her. Dunstan took another bite, but his appetite was retreating rapidly. He hadn't taken more than a couple of bites before the clock chimed 8, and everyone dumped their trays before heading to class. The three of them stopped, looking at each other before waving and heading down the hallway to their respective classes. Dunstan hoped the little girl would be able to hold her own. He hoped he and Dex would too, for that matter, and it wasn't a great thought on your first day of school. "Oh well," he breathed as he fell in with the group of blue bands. "I guess we'll find out." "Welcome, blue bands, to your first lesson. I'm Mrs. Lloyd, and I will be your minder." Rebecca looked around the room and saw 7 others in the class. Their group had been the largest by far, and she'd been surprised when Gerald had come up with a blue band as well. She hadn't really asked what his power was, but she supposed he was like her. She guessed that most of them were like her, seers and future tellers and the like. It was scary, but it was good to know that she wasn't alone in her weirdness. "As some of you may have figured out," said the woman in the flowing dress with the long honey wheat hair, "blue bands designate you as seers. You use your powers to see things, whether it be the future or the past. Let's go around the room and share our abilities with each other." There were no desks here, no books or computers, just a circle of chairs that kept everyone within view. Rebecca could see 4 boys and 3 other girls, one of them a giant with platinum hair that looked like a hardback book sitting amongst paperbacks. She had to be an adult. She looked a little like an adult, but when she offered to go first, Rebecca was amazed that a voice that soft came from something so large. Her voice was twinged with something slightly Germanic, and it seemed like she might be Northern European, German, or Icelandic, or somewhere like that. "I guess I will. I'm Emily, and I see things that come true. The problem is that no one believes me when I tell them. My mother said she had it too. All the women in our family do, and she says it's like Cassandra from the Greek stories. Last August, I told my friend Eula that she would break her arm while sledding. She didn't believe me, but when she did, she said I was strange and would not be my friend anymore." "Wonderful," the woman said, and when Emily looked at her strangely, she waved a hand at her. "Not about your friend, dear. That's terrible, but it's good that you understand your powers. Who would like to go next?" A boy named Jax went next, talking about visions he saw when he dreamed, but when the minder's attention had turned away from the other side of the room, Rebecca leaned down and whispered to Gerald. He had insisted on sitting next to her, because of course he had, and she was now a little glad of it. "Should we lie?" she half-mouthed at him, keeping her voice low, but Gerald shook his head. "They know what we can do already. No sense lying, they'll know." "Yeah, but since you two would like to talk," the minder said, her cheery voice becoming strained, "why don't you two go next?" Rebecca balked, but Gerald stood up as if he'd only been waiting for the opportunity. "I'm Gerald. I'm 10, and I see strings. I see the connection between people, where they lead, and how they will affect me. Blue means friends, orange means danger, green is positive interactions, while red means certain death. They don't really tell people's future, I guess, and mostly help me navigate without being hurt." "Interesting," the woman said, sounding mystified. "And do you see a string attached to me?" "Yes," Gerald said. It's green." Then he took his seat again. The woman seemed a little underwhelmed, but turned to Rebecca, raising an eyebrow. "And you, young lady?" Rebecca rose slowly, trying to bury the fear that writhed inside her. She hated public speaking, had always hated it, but she wanted to make a good first impression. She hoped she wouldn't stutter too bad. Better a stutterer than a coward, though, she supposed. I'm Rebecca, and I see the future sometimes. I guess I have visions too, like Emily, but I'd never told anyone about them, so I don't know if they believed me or not. I can't really control them, though. They just kind of happen." She felt like she should say more, but she sat down instead, not sure what she would have added. Gerald gave her a thumbs up as the minder turned to another boy and invited him to speak. I'm Dunstan. I see things by holding things. I pick up memories, I guess, but I've never asked anyone if they're true or not. I just kind of assumed. The minder nodded. An automatic writer. I can assure you there will be plenty of opportunities to test your visions here, Dunstan. Far from looking relieved, Dunstan nodded morosely. Dang, I was kind of hoping it was all in my head. Some of the kids laughed, but the minder moved on like she hadn't heard. A girl named Anja started talking about seeing the future in people's palms, but Rebecca wasn't paying attention to her. She was looking at Gerald, who was looking at the boy the minder had called an automatic writer. Gerald's eyes were big, intent, and though he kept looking away before the boy could notice him, she knew he was seeing something. It was the same look he gave her sometimes, so she hoped it was good. I'm Mark, the last boy said. I can tell who passes by a place by touching footprints or fingerprints. I figured it out when my daddy and I were hunting a few years ago, and it usually helps me track things. Usually just works on animals, but recently I discovered I could see a person's face if I touched something their fingerprints were on. Very interesting, the minder said, beaming at them as she looked around the room. Now that we know what we can do, let's begin some exercises to strengthen your abilities. Mark, Dunstan, and Anja, why don't you all go with my friend there? She said, indicating a man in a red smock they hadn't noticed until now. It was no wonder they hadn't seen him, and seeing him again drew the breath into Rebecca harshly. He had been right there the whole time, that tiny little traitor. Dr. Hammarskjöld smiled at the children, but when he looked at Rebecca, she saw a sad look cross his face. Good, he should be sad, she thought bitterly. He had to be the reason she was here, and when she started to get up, Gerald took her hand. She looked at him, and he shook his head knowingly, telling her to let it go with his eyes. Dr. Hammarskjöld had taken the three kids into another part of the room before she turned back, and she imagined he was probably glad to be away from her. If the minder had noticed her trying to rise, she didn't comment on it. The rest of you, I want you to close your eyes and try to focus your power on your gifts. Focus your thoughts, and let's see what we can do. Dex gritted his teeth as he focused his thoughts on the dummy in front of him. He had never really done this on something without a mind, and certainly never in front of an audience. Most of the time, he tried to pretend he didn't have powers, but as he felt them building, like a fist drawing back, he released them and hit the dummy square. It wobbled, spinning drunkenly before coming back to rest on its base. A hand came down on his shoulder, and he looked up into the grinning face of the man Masha had called Cutter. From this close, he had no doubt that the guy could be mean, and he didn't doubt it when Masha said that he would have liked to slap her. The guy had scars on his knuckles, and he looked more like a longshoreman than a teacher. Good shot, kid. It's harder to hit a non-thinking being, I'm guessing. That's okay. We'll get you there. Next. Dick stepped up next, bumping Dex as he walked by and then sneering when Dex lifted an eyebrow at him. He wasn't as big as Dex, but he was sturdier to be sure. Dick looked like he'd gotten 3 squares a day before coming here, and he looked like the only running he had done was recreational. He'd said proudly that he was captain of his football team, and that he'd been looking forward to high school next year, so he could see how he stacked up against the bigger kids. Dex imagined he stacked up quite well, but sports probably weren't the only metric he meant to use. Dick got up to the line, taking a stance like a martial artist preparing to thrust his closed palm at the dummy. Something like a gust of wind came out to slam into it, a gust of wind as big as a canoe, and the dummy fell over. It didn't wobble, it didn't shimmy. It fell straight back, and Dick stood up with a pump of his arm and a loud whoop. The bald man gave him a similar pat on the back, telling him to hop back in line. On the way, he shoulder-checked a kid who couldn't have been more than 12. The kid fell, going down hard on his ass, and he made an indignant sound at Dick as the bigger boy walked past. "Got a problem?" Dick said, squaring up as he loomed over the kid. The smaller boy, Dex thought his name was Ryan, turned away as he took his spot on the line. There were 5 red bands, and all of them had some kind of physical ability. Dick was one of the bigger bugs, but the kids before Dex had barely managed to move the dummy. They all pushed out with some kind of psychic energy, as far as he could tell, and it appeared he wasn't as bad at this as he thought. His head hurt a little, but that was pretty normal. As Ryan stepped up, he looked at Cutter and told him this probably wasn't going to work. He smiled, but Dex thought he could hear the man's teeth creak. "Any particular reason why not?" "It just doesn't work that way. I've never tried attacking anything without a brain. My power doesn't really—" "Just give it a try," Cutter said. "We're just here to see what you can do." Ryan sighed and turned back to the dummy. He scrunched his face up, drawing laughter from Dick, Wade, and a girl named Cece who looked a little like a troll. Dex didn't join them. For all her size and bluster, Cece had barely managed to shake the dummy, and Wade had nearly passed out from the effort of bumping it with his power. He didn't really see as any of them had a lot of room to make fun, and he crossed his arms as he watched the kid work. A vein ticked in Ryan's forehead, and he gritted his teeth like he was trying to take a dump. The other kids laughed all the harder, and that didn't seem to be helping matters much for Ryan, as he finally dropped his hands and looked at the handler. He shrugged, shaking his head and looking unamused. "I told you, I've never attacked anything without a brain." Cutter shrugged. "Well, we'll work on that," he said, turning to face them as Ryan returned to the line. "Physical powers are difficult. No one is claiming otherwise. Unlike some of the more mental stuff, your body has to be prepared to harness that kind of power. You'll spend a lot of time in the gym here, a lot of time building stamina, and that will help you expand what you can do with your powers. This class will be a lot more demanding than the classes your peers will take, but it will all be worth it in the end. Just remember that." "You listening, Ryan?" Dick asked, and the others laughed again as the smaller kid's face got redder. If Cutter minded, he gave no indication. "Let's get to work then, shall we?" They broke for lunch around noon, and all 3 of them were a little less enthusiastic when they met up in the cafeteria. Dex was sweaty and sore. Class with Cutter was more like gym than anything. They had run, they'd done exercises, and they had used the machines in the workout room, and in between, they'd used their powers. Dick seemed capable of using his on command, and Dex wondered how often he'd used it before he'd been picked up. Ryan still couldn't do much more than grunt, but he wasn't alone. Wayne could use his power a little and make little pushes once or twice a day, but that was it. Cece and Dex could use their powers up to 3 times a day, but the 3rd time had given Dex a nosebleed, and he'd had to sit down for a minute and drink some water. He figured this would earn him some catcalls from Dick and his little gang, but it hadn't. Dick apparently had realized that he couldn't push Dex around like he could Ryan, and he had begun focusing on the smaller boy more and more. Ryan was trying, but Dick was hounding him every chance he got. Dex told his friends about it, and as he watched Ryan eating with some kids his age, Dick tossed a spoon at him and laughed. "That kid's got an ass whooping down the road," he said, and Dunstan agreed. "I don't know if I can go back to class this afternoon," Dunstan said. "I've held so many things today that I think I might have a stroke if the spoon wasn't so clean." "Ooh, holding stuff," Dex said, but he said it good-naturedly. Dunstan wished it had been just holding stuff. Dr. Hammarskjöld was a nice enough guy, but he had the weirdest collection of things. Dunstan had seen 2 happy couples from different pieces of jewelry, a murder-suicide that he wished he hadn't, and a man get cut in half by a semi-truck from just a pair of sneakers. The last one had been a loud argument between someone's parents from a kid's Tonka truck, and that one had really messed him up. The way the kid just sat there, focusing on the big yellow dump truck, you could tell this wasn't the first fight he'd witnessed. His appetite from this morning was nearly gone, and he was mostly just picking at his food apathetically. "At least you don't have Chandra in your head all the time," Masha said glumly. All through lessons this morning, boring things that really didn't hold her attention, Chandra, the blonde bully from the dorm, had done nothing but torment Masha. She had said some pretty cruel things, and Masha had to wipe tears away more than once throughout the lessons. "You tell a teacher?" Dex said, guessing it probably wouldn't do any good. "No, if I tattle she wins. I'll be okay, it's just words." Dex nodded as he looked at his food, wondering how long it would be just words. "You know, a girl could get a little jealous of all the attention you've been giving out." Gerald didn't bother to look at her. His eyes were still glued to the little group eating not too far away. "Why don't you go introduce yourself?" Rebecca said, sighing deeply. "Did your parents not teach you how to make friends?" "Dad tried to teach me how to cook meth once, but I'm not sure that's the chemistry that you're talking about here." Rebecca raised an eyebrow at that, but decided to change the subject. "What do you see that's so interesting anyway? Is it the strings?" "Yeah," Gerald said, turning away as Dunstan glanced in his direction, clearly feeling his eyes on him. "You didn't tell me you could do stuff like that." "You didn't ask," Gerald said, and Rebecca almost threw her spoon at him. "What string do you see around me?" she asked, more to stop him from staring and causing trouble. "Blue," he said, and she believed him, unlike when he had told the minder that hers was green. "And what color do you see when you look at those three?" When he turned back to answer, his attention was so intense that she wished she hadn't asked. The clock sounded the end of lunch, but it didn't stop her from hearing his answer. All of them, threaded into a single strand and pulsating like neon tubing. Masha tried not to look bored, but the work was pretty easy. There were 6 of them in class, which was good because it meant the work groups were even. The mean girl was in class, though, so that was bad. Mrs. Cashmere, their minder, was nice, so that was good, and she seemed to like Masha, which was also good. She could hear the mean girl in her thoughts as her partner, a dark-haired girl named Heather, thought about shapes while Masha picked them out of her head. Of the 6 people in class, 5 were girls. Masha, Jenny, and Brittany, her friends called her Brit, were telepaths. The mean girl, Chandra, and Heather were what the minder called implanters, people who could implant things in people's heads. Daniel, the only boy in class, was something called a director. He could direct people's thoughts on a particular path and lead them to ideas or concepts they might be trying to come to. This sounded a lot like implanting, but it was supposed to be more subtle. Implanters can put the idea in someone's mind, but a strong mind can still resist it. Directors can work more subtle ideas into a mind and make them come to the conclusion that they might be less likely to come to on their own, something that's hard for an implanter. That was what Miss Cashmere had said when Masha had said they sounded the same, and Chandra had stuck her tongue out at Masha when the minder had turned around. Now they were split up, a telepath and an implanter, or a director in Brit's case, and they were playing a training game. The implanter would draw a card from the deck and look at the symbol on it. Then the telepath would try to pick it out of their head, while they sent them a different symbol. Heather was trying her best, but Masha was pretty good at picking out the truth from the lies. She had gotten 7 out of 10 so far, and it would have been 10 out of 10, except Masha kept trying to trip her up. It appeared she wasn't content to stump Jenny, who wasn't very good at being a telepath, but to send wrong answers to Masha to trip her up. "Wow," said Heather, "you're really good, but I'm gonna stump you." She drew another card, and Masha tried to listen for the words and look for the hidden pictures. As she searched for the truth, the voice buzzed in the back of her head. "Star, circle, moon, slip up, you little bitch." "Square," Masha said, and Heather smiled as she nodded. "Moon, horseshoe, star, you dumb little..." "Circle," Masha said, and Heather nodded again. Chandra's meddling didn't help much, and after 30 cards, Masha still had the best score out of the group. "You're very talented, Masha. I wouldn't be surprised if you were one of the stronger telepaths of the group." Masha had been afraid that this might raise some jealousy, but the other students were surprisingly supportive. All of them except Chandra, who just looked even angrier than she had before. When they left class at the end of session, Masha was happy to see that she wasn't alone. Heather and Jenny had decided to walk with her, and Chandra hovered near the back, an angry cloud of loud emotions. At 4 o'clock, the bell rang, and they were released for more free time. Masha, Dex, and Dunstan fell in together, and Masha was all agush about classes. She had performed better than Chandra, the blonde bully, and Dunstan said that he had done some interesting things too in the afternoon classes. Dex was surprisingly quiet, but he was also pretty tired. Dex wasn't paying attention to the others as they chatted, though. Dex was watching Ryan, scenting danger. All through the afternoon workout, Dick had been laying into Ryan pretty hard. Cutter did not seem to be there to keep them from picking at each other. He almost seemed to enjoy it. Dex had tried to talk to Ryan and maybe make it harder for people to start shit with him, but Ryan seemed distrustful of him and usually kept his distance or spoke in monosyllables. When Dick had tripped him on the running track, making some excuse about not seeing him there, Dex had thought it would reach a head right then and there, but it hadn't. Now we could see Dick and his new gang hovering around the poor kid like flies on crap, and when Dick shoved him hard enough to make him hit the nearby wall, Dex was in motion. "Dex?" Dunstan said, moving to keep up, but Dex didn't have time to explain. "Leave me alone, Dick!" Ryan shouted, rounding on him with his fists balled up. "Oh, you gonna fight me, shrimp? Take your shot. I'll beat you to a last chance," Ryan growled, putting his hands on his temples. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will if you keep this up." That brought a chorus of laughs from the 3 red bands, and Dick crossed his arms over his chest as he grinned at the boy. He was sneering, but he hadn't seemed to notice the blood dribbling from his nose yet. "Tell you what, Squirt, take your best shot. We all saw how pathetic you were out there. You think any of us are—" But he stopped when Dex got between them. Dex felt a tingle on the back of his head, but it stopped pretty quick. Ryan wasn't opposed to defending himself, but it appeared he didn't want to hurt people who had done nothing to him. "That's enough, Dick. It's not funny. Never was. Leave this kid alone." Dick grinned, but Dex saw the murder in his eyes as he gave Dex his full attention. "Or what?" Dex pulled himself up to his full imposing size, and he saw the bigger boy back down a little. Dex wasn't a bully, but he was a big guy. He wasn't as filled out as Dick, but he was still big, and big meant a lot to guys like Dick. It gave him pause, if nothing else, and that was all Dex needed. Dex didn't answer. He didn't have to, and Dick just scoffed and walked off with his cronies eventually, the situation over. The crowd that had been gathering dispersed, no longer smelling blood, and Dex sighed as everything returned to, well, something like normal. "I didn't need you to," Ryan started, but Dex rounded on him and stole his words. "Yeah, I think you did. I don't know what you've got there, but it's a gun, like mine. You need to figure out how to use it before you get somebody hurt." "I know how to use my power," Ryan shot back, looking away as if Dex had guessed what he'd been about to do. "I don't really know the rules around here, but I can't imagine they're okay with kids killing each other. You got something Dick doesn't. Don't let him trick you into killing both of you with it." He started back towards his friends, but stopped midway between them and Ryan. "If he bothers you, come sit with us. My friends and I don't like bullies either, and there's safety in numbers." "I don't need protecting," Ryan said to his back. "Nah," Dex said, "but everybody needs a friend." Gerald watched the group move off, still seeing that banded line that connected all of them to him. He'd seen the string change colors, but he'd never seen them like this. This was different, and he didn't know what to make of it. "Looks like the fight's over," Rebecca said, tugging his arm and leading him towards the library. She'd found a collection of Twilight books, her favorite series, and she wanted to get them before any of the other girls got there and checked them out first. Gerald went with, not really caring for books at the moment. There was a bigger mystery afoot, and he was intent on solving it, since his life seemed to hang in the balance. I swear, Gerald, why don't you just go talk to them? It was breakfast time, on their 5th day inside whatever this was, and Gerald was once again staring at the group eating breakfast and happily talking. There were 6 of them this morning, the kid with the red band from the hallway before having become a staple at the table. It appeared that the largest of them, she thought his name might be Diz or Dez, was drawing in others, and a few of the green bands had come to sit with the little girl. Rebecca was half tempted to go over and sit with them too, if it would bring Gerald out of his funk. He'd been quiet and moody since seeing the other blue band, Dunstan. That was definitely his name. And it was starting to bring her down. It was hard to enjoy Twilight for the 7th or 8th time when he was being aloof in the next bed over. "Not time yet," he said, taking a bite of his toast as he watched them covertly. She chewed her eggs as she waited and finally realized she would have to ask. "And what, pray tell, is the right time to go to them?" Gerald turned back to her, something that was rare these days, and sludged his toast through the grits and eggs he'd been eating before. Rebecca shivered. If there was one thing she couldn't stand, it was wet bread. "I have spent the last 5 years following these strings towards something. Call it destiny or fate or whatever, but it's leading me towards something important. When I was 6, I saw my first red string, and I followed it, not knowing what it meant. I was excited. This was the first time I had seen a color other than blue or green or orange." Rebecca found that she didn't believe him as he told her the story of his first brush with danger. Not about the story, but he had almost slipped up and said something when he talked about the colors, and that made her think there might be more than the colors that he had mentioned. She didn't say as much. Gerald was so tight-lipped that any chance to learn a little more about him was welcome, but she filed it away for later. I followed it to my neighbor's house. My neighbor kept dogs, you see, and he'd left the gate open to their pen. They weren't friendly dogs. I think he probably bred them for fighting, but they were asleep, and I managed to creep away before they noticed me. Those dogs got out 2 days later, and 3 of them mauled a toddler who was just sitting in his yard playing. I knew then that the red was like the orange, and I needed to be mindful." "Fascinating," Rebecca said, "but what does this have to do with those kids over there that you keep staring at?" After that day, I never approached anyone that had a red or an orange string attached to them. They were dangerous, they could be deadly, and I gave them a wide berth. Those kids have all the colors I'm familiar with. The string connecting them to me is all wound up, pulsing like neon, and I don't know what that means. I also don't know what meeting them will mean. I don't know if they're friends, enemies, something else, but until I figure it out, I want to observe them and see what they mean to do." Rebecca nodded, sighing as she scooped up more eggs and grits. She supposed that would have to do. For now. "You were tossing a lot in your sleep," Gerald said suddenly, and she glanced at him as if wondering what he meant by it. "Sorry if I kept you awake." "Please," he scoffed. "I'm used to being woken up by drunks. I barely noticed you. No, I was wondering if you were having any visions or something." Rebecca started to tell him that if he wasn't going to tell her about his powers, then why would she talk about hers? But she squashed it. He was curious, and it just so happened that she had seen something recently. Maybe all that quiet concentration had helped. Maybe it was just dumb luck, but Rebecca was glad to have something that might help her with the tasks to come. I saw a door, but it wasn't really a door, I guess." She expected him to roll his eyes, but he leaned in closer, prompting her to go on. It had a wheel on it, like in a submarine, and as I looked at it, I could feel something in my head. It was like bugs crawling around inside my skull, and I could feel a high-pitched sound, like an emergency tone, rising up my spine. The walls around the door made me think it might be in this place, and if it is, I don't want to see what's behind it. Gerald was nodding, cruising his third piece of toast through the mush before nibbling on it. Any idea where it might be? Rebecca shook her head. Nope, I've never seen it before. As the clock went off to call them to class, they picked up their trays and went to dump them in the garbage can. Gerald didn't say anything. He was thinking about something, though whether it was about her dream or the predicament with the kids he'd been looking at, Rebecca didn't know. So, she asked, as the two headed for another day of whatever quantified as class around here. I think it's just something we'll have to keep an eye peeled for. And maybe in the meantime, we just stay on guard. Rebecca sighed. Talking to Gerald was always so helpful. Again, Cutter yelled. Dex was out of breath, but he pushed out hard, and this time the dummy hit the ground with a whump. The last two brain blasts had spun it around, but this one was a solid hit straight to the face. It helped to put Dick's face on the dummy when he fired it, longing to wipe the cocky grin off that smart mouth. After 5 days in the boys' company, Dex didn't think he had ever disliked anyone more in his life, except maybe Mr. Gino. Again, Cutter yelled, and Dex felt the blood dribble out of his nose as he fired another one. The dummy fell, but he was getting lightheaded. Before he'd come here, Dex had never tried to do one of these more than once a day, maybe twice in a dire situation. This would make number 4, and when Cutter yelled for him to do it again, Dex wobbled in place as he shot another. It went wide, clipping the dummy in the side, and he fell over as the gym rippled like pond water. 5, Cutter said. Yesterday it was 3. Today you performed 5 before your body gave out. Very impressive, Dexter. Dex sat up, putting a hand to his head. It's Dex, he said, his tongue sounding furry. No one calls me Dexter. Cutter laughed, helping him up and pressing a water bottle into his hand. Fair enough, Dex. He helped him to a bench, yelling at Wayne to get ready as Dex pressed the cold bottle of water to his forehead. They had started their day with exercise, push-ups, jumping jacks, and things like that, followed by a half-mile run. Not a walk, Shrekina, Cutter had said when Cece had taken up some kind of lazy jog. A run! And he meant it. They had run the whole way, Cutter keeping pace before they'd come to the target range and started knocking over dummies. It was only 10, and it already felt like a full day. Ryan came to sit next to him, looking sullen as he watched Wayne struggle to make another of the explosive gusts he created. None of them knocked over the target, but they did hit them. Unlike Dick, who thrust out walls of energy, Wayne pushed out a fan of force. It hit everything in a wide arc, but it was sloppy, and it took a lot of energy. He's gonna yell at me when I can't do it today, Ryan said, watching as he browbeat Wayne for collapsing after the third one. Maybe not, Dex said, watching as Wayne stumbled a little and gained his feet. How does your power work, if you don't mind me asking? Ryan thought about it before pointing to the dummy's head and moving down to the chest. I kind of think about the part I want to affect, and I just do it. Usually it's the head. I give people headaches, nosebleeds, maybe stop their tongue from moving. But he faltered, not quite ready to share that much yet. I don't go lower. It's dangerous to try it on people's organs, and I never use too much effort. Dex nodded, but the thought of this kid's power made him want to shiver. This kid didn't have a gun. He had a bomb. This kid had a nuclear option in his head, and Dex was glad he had stopped the fight in the hall before it got out of hand, as mad as Ryan had been at Dick for living up to his namesake. He didn't want to watch his head pop like a pimple. "When you do it, do you push out at all?" Ryan shook his head slowly. "No, it's more of a targeted thing." Dex nodded. The brain blast was always a push, like when you curl up a fist and punch. He would gather it up, form it in his mind, and then shove it out, thus creating the blast. He didn't know exactly what it did to people. It seemed to stun them mentally as much as physically, but he knew it was always done the same way. Try picturing just the head of the dummy. Not the brain or anything, but just the head. Then push out like you're punching someone. Ryan cocked a head, thinking it over. "Think it would work?" "Ryan!" Cutter shouted, Wayne having staggered off to lean against the wall. "You're up." "Only one way to find out," Dex said. Ryan hopped up, taking his spot on the line as he prepared to try. Dex watched him scrunch his face up, closing his eyes and straining as if trying to take a dump. His lip came up with the effort as he tried to push out, the peanut gallery tuning up. "Better grab him another onesie," Dick said. "Looks like he's about to mess that one." Cutter glowered at Ryan as if accusing him of wasting his time. "If you can't strike out physically, then we'll have to reevaluate your red band status. I don't know what you'd be otherwise. Maybe a white band or a..." Cutter missed it, but Dex didn't. The dummy wobbled slightly, about as much as when Wayne thought at it, and Ryan gasped when he realized that he had done that. "Go sit down then, Ryan. I'll need to talk to Ridley to see if..." "Hang on," Ryan said, closing his eyes again and concentrating. Dex thought he could feel something this time, like a forming of something. He thought at Ryan encouragingly, hoping he could hear him, as he pulled in power for another attack. The last one had been a fluke, that's what Dex thought, but this one had intent, and Dex believed it would hit better. "Don't hurt yourself, kid. It's a good effort, but if you can't do it, then you can't..." He snapped the energy out like a spring, and it hit the dummy in the center of the forehead. The fleshy target fell back, but Dex had seen the skin on the forehead ripple like a wave as it slammed home. He had told the kid he had a gun, but now he thought he might have a sniper rifle. The kid was accurate. The kid had power, and as the dummy hit the ground, Dex was even gladder he had stepped up for him. Otherwise, they would have sent what was left of Dick home in a garbage bag. "Holy shit," Cutter said. "Very good, right?" But Dex looked back from the dummy and saw Ryan laying on the ground. He was breathing hard, gasping like a landed fish, and as Dex made a dash for him, Cutter put a hand out. He was already beside the kid, snapping his fingers and holding the kid's eyes open. Ryan looked like he was having a panic attack, and as his breathing finally evened out, Cutter sighed a deep sigh as he sat back a little. Ryan sat up, shaking his head and blinking very fast, as if trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Dex saw that instead of a nosebleed, some of the veins in his eyes were standing out in accusation, and Dex put a hand on his shoulder as he asked if he was okay. Ryan nodded, still looking around like he didn't know where he was. Cutter seemed impressed with him, though, and when he told Dex to take him to the nurse, the bigger boy trotted him out of the gym in a hurry. As they walked, Dex tried to figure out how to apologize for pushing the kid. This was his fault. He had done too much, and Ryan had paid the price. In a lot of ways, Ryan and Masha reminded him of the kids he'd taken care of, the injured and the deformed kids who didn't have a place to go. This place was like that, except even the weakest of them had no problem taking care of themselves. "Ryan, don't," Ryan said, grinning at him as he turned to look at Dex. "You have nothing to apologize for. You showed me I could do it, and now the rest of them know it too." Dex wanted to be happy about it, but those weird veins in his eyes made Ryan look a little crazed. "And now that I know I can, I want to get better, so no one messes with me again." Dex nodded, not having it in him to smile. "You will. Of that I have no doubt." "So you want me to run a maze?" Gerald said. The little doctor, the one Rebecca hated so much, had taken him from class and asked him to participate in a special assignment. He'd spent the last 3 days in and out of Hammershoal's little class, and the good doctor still had no clue what he was capable of. Gerald was pretty sure that he was having trouble measuring his ability, and they wanted to get some kind of data on him. Hence, the maze. Hammershoal twiddled his thumbs nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "It's more of an obstacle course than anything. We're hoping your strings will be able to navigate you on the best path to success, while avoiding the obstacles we've put in the way." Gerald tried not to glance down at the orange string coming off of Hammershoal. The man was dangerous, but no more than the minder who taught the class. At least it wasn't red, like the big man who made the announcements every morning, and that gave him some solace. Hammershoal was probably more of a curious fool than an actual threat, and Gerald was used to that. After all, Mrs. Castleberry had been just a well-meaning fool too in the end. "What happens if I choose not to do this?" Gerald asked. He had already decided that he was going to do it. He was curious to see the extent of his power too, but he wanted to know the consequences of refusal. This was a strange place full of adults who acted like friends, and children who often acted like enemies, and Gerald sometimes felt like Alice as she traversed Wonderland. He'd expected the little man to get angry, but he didn't. Dr. Hammershoal only shrugged, the motion looking comical on his tiny shoulders. "Then you don't do it. I put down in your file that you refused, and we try to find some way to utilize your power. We would like to test your abilities, gain a metric for them, but if we can't, then we can't." Gerald nodded. "Okay, I'll run the course then." Dr. Hammershoal smiled. "Good. I thought you might. I'll be observing you, but don't feel like you have to hurry. Take your time, explore the maze, and find the end at your own pace." Gerald turned away from him, satisfied with the answer, as he set off down the narrow corridor. They would have been claustrophobic for someone like Cutter, but they were just the right size for Gerald. Hammershoal, he thought, could have run quite easily through them, and the thought made him laugh. He sensed that the doctor knew more than he was letting on, and that the powers were something he had once experienced himself. He didn't know the history he and Rebecca had, but he figured she would tell him in time. He came to a crossroad and looked at the strings. One was green, one was blue. Gerald decided to follow the green one for now, and when he came to a set of stairs, he saw a blue string going around the back of them, while an orange string went straight up. He started to follow the blue string, but went up the stairs instead, just to explore. He saw the string stretching up those stairs, pulsing like an infected tooth as it slowly turned red. Interesting, he thought, and as he came to the top of the stairs, he saw an almost comical stone thumper that came down to crash a few inches from his face. Okay, danger indeed. That tracked. Gerald came back down the stairs and followed the blue string to a series of 4 doors. 2 of them had blue strings, 1 of them had an orange string, and the last one had a red string. The fact that he hadn't seen a black string yet made him think that there were some safety measures in place to keep him from dying, but he still wasn't going to take any chances. He turned the knob on the orange door and stepped behind the door as it opened, putting the wall to his back. There was a loud crash as a bunch of junk fell out, and looking at some of it showed him that it could have hurt if it had hit him. He didn't bother with the red door and picked door number 2 as he proceeded. It led him to 3 glass bridges, and he rolled his eyes as he looked down at the padded fall below him. 2 had orange strings leading across them, and 1 had a blue string. Gerald took the blue string and went through the door to find himself in a small room with a computer. At the desk was a small man, smiling as he waved him over. Dr. Hammershoal looked pleased with whatever results he'd found, and Gerald found his grin to be infectious. The computer he was at showed a video of Gerald as he went between the little tests, and as he stopped or hesitated, Hammarskjöld would pause and ask him questions. "Why did you choose the left path?" Gerald shrugged. "Seemed like a good idea." Hammarskjöld rolled his eyes. "What color did you see? And please, Gerald, be honest." Blue and green," Gerald answered, deciding to humor him for now. "Is blue always a safe color?" Hammarskjöld asked. "Sometimes," Gerald said. "Blue is a goal color. It isn't always safe," he said, thinking of the blue string that had moved him to the side with his father that day in the principal's office. "But it leads me to my ultimate goal, and that's important." "What is your ultimate goal?" Hammarskjöld asked, clicking pause again as the Gerald in the video came to the stairs. "I don't know," Gerald admitted, "but it's important, and following it is the only way I discover it." Hammarskjöld nodded, pointing to the stairs as he watched Gerald hesitate and then go up the stairs. "Why'd you go upstairs first?" "I was curious." "You knew there was danger up there, though." Gerald shrugged. "You told me to explore, so I explored a little." "Like with the doors," Hammarskjöld said, fast-forwarding to the 4 doors. "Yeah. What made you go to the other door before choosing the right one?" "I was curious." "About what?" Hammarskjöld said, clearly tired of the answer. "Was there anything there that could actually kill me?" Gerald asked, surprising the little man with his sudden question. "Well, that thing at the top of the stairs could have crushed you, and that other door had a burst of flame that would... and you would have just let me die." "Well, no, we would have taken you to the infirmary and gotten you help." Gerald got up, and he saw the little doctor get slightly red-faced. Gerald had collected all the data he needed, and he was ready to go. This was becoming tiresome, and he doubted it would benefit him on more than a surface level to stay. "Word of advice, Doc, if you want to test my abilities, put me in some danger. I've lived in a state of high alert for the last 5 years, over half my life, and I barely even flinch at an orange string these days. Very little out there got even a light orange, and that tells me you aren't serious." "Now hold on a second," Hammarskjöld said, throwing himself off the chair and making it spin a little. "Are you asking us to put your life in danger?" "If you want accurate data, then yes. My meth-head father put me in more danger before breakfast than your whole funhouse did, and if you want to get my heart rate up, then you need to get creative, because that was embarrassing." He left then, choosing the door with the blue string running under it, and leaving the doctor to his new data. "What do you think they're testing us for, Dunn?" Dunstan looked up from the ice pop that he'd been working on and shrugged. "Dunno, Dex. Maybe we're super soldiers or something. Well, you red bands are for sure. I guess I'm more here for intelligence work, or whatever they call it. Intelligence is always what they called it in the spy comics." Dex was eating the cone of his ice cream as he watched Masha cross the monkey bars, her face a mess from the chocolate popsicle she'd been eating. These were the times that it was the easiest to remember how young she was, and this girl was a contrast to the little lady who sat with the other green bands and presided over them with poise and grace. He liked it better when she could just be a little girl, a little smiling girl of 6 who just wanted to play and have fun and not worry about weird powers and strange children. "They do seem to be training us for something, don't they?" Dex said. "Just wish I knew what it was." "I'm sure they'll tell us when they're ready. It's only our first week here, and there's probably a lot they haven't told us yet," Dunstan said, wincing as the brain freeze hit him. They're just waiting for the right time, I guess." Dex didn't believe that for a second, and when he remembered something Dunstan had said, he decided to ask an impertinent question. "Hey, didn't you say you knew your mom was your mom when you touched her?" Dunstan nodded, but the look on his face seemed worse than the brain freeze. "Yeah, I think maybe she used to be like us. In this place, I mean." "Did she have any info about it?" Dunstan scrunched his face up, racking his brain to try and remember something that might help. The word washout came up a few times. I think that's what happened to her. She didn't pass and graduate, so she became one of these washouts. I think most of the people who grab kids are washouts. When they wash out, they lose their abilities somehow, too, because when I touched her, some of hers came back, I think. Dex raised an eyebrow. Do any of them know that? He said, waving a hand in the air to mean he was talking about the royal we. I don't even think she realizes it yet. Not really. I think maybe the little guy has some power too. Dr. Hammarskjöld. Sometimes if I brush his hand or bump into him, I get a flash of him talking to people and making them feel better. Some of it was from when he was younger, but a couple of them are from recently. I think he still has some of his power too, though he keeps it under wraps. Dex hummed to himself. Why would he do that? Dunstan rolled up his popsicle wrapper and tossed it in the garbage. No clue. I guess we still have a lot to learn about this place. Dex nodded. That was for damn sure. Dr. Hammarskjöld sighed as he came up the hall from staff dining much later. Classes had ended hours ago, but he still had so much to do. He had wanted to be with the Green Bands, the class that he had been in when he was here, but Ridley had been insistent that he oversee the Blue Bands. Despite the minder they put out front, Hammarskjöld hadn't even bothered to learn her name. He was the real power in the class. Hammarskjöld made the lesson plans, planned the activities, pored over the data they collected until the wee hours of the night. He supposed it was lucky that he only needed half as much sleep as the normal-sized people. He opened his office and gasped, clutching at his heart as he saw a ghost sitting in his swivel chair. Jesus Christ! Warn someone before you show up. You almost gave me a heart attack. Security Chief Ridley grinned at the little man, and the effect was ghastly. Just checking on your progress in Blue Group. Did you get the data on our mysterious power? Hammarskjöld waddled in and closed the door. He's elusive. I don't think he's in the right group. Oh? Do I need to put him with the meatheads or maybe the brains? No, and he'd be a poor fit for the support group, too. I don't think he's seeing any future other than his own, and he doesn't even know what it is. Ridley mused, flipping through the reports. Doesn't bode well for him. Guess he'd make a good snatcher, but only if he'd play ball. He won't, Hammarskjöld said. He thinks rather a lot of himself. He's very intelligent for a boy you pulled out of a trailer park. That's what his test scores said, too, Ridley admitted. What about the tracker, or the boy with the object affinity? Hammarskjöld hated the impersonal way he talked about the kids. Ridley only cared about their powers. He didn't give a damn about them as people. They were only good for one thing, and Hammarskjöld almost hoped that none of the Blue Bands would give him what he wanted in that respect. You never saw the graduates after they moved on, and sometimes he wondered if that wasn't a blessing. Both are strong, both are gifted, and Mark will definitely play ball if you offer to make him a snatcher after he washes out. And the other one? Dunstan might, Hammarskjöld admitted. Is it true that Janice is his mother? He'd be one of 4 legacies in the whole history of the Blacksite. Yeah, but keep that to yourself, Nathan. You and I are the only ones who know, aside from Janice, so if I hear a little rumor going around, I'll know who to come talk to. Dr. Hammarskjöld shuddered and hoped that Ripley hadn't seen it. He had always been terrified of this old ghoul, ever since he was a kid. It was surprising how little had changed in the last 20 years, and that was almost scarier. Ridley was like an eternally grinning skull set up on a wizard's knick-knack shelf, untouched by time and privy to the secrets of the universe. Do you have any potential graduates? Ridley asked, and the little doctor could hear the hunger in his voice. Too soon to tell, Hammarskjöld said, but he knew he'd said it too quickly. Don't try to shelter them, Nathan. You know that's why they're here. You can coddle them and change their scores to make me think they're better washed out. But talent, always finds a way to float to the surface. If there are graduates in your group, I'll find them." Dr. Hammarskjöld said nothing. He just watched as Security Chief Ridley got up and walked towards the door, looking like he had nothing more important to do than head to the cafeteria for a snack. When the door closed behind him, Nathan Hammarskjöld let himself grip the desk and shudder like a child having a bad dream. He hadn't felt this small in a long time, not since he'd been a child at the state orphanage. He'd known kids twice as cruel as some of these little monsters here, and he'd used his abilities to put some of them out of his path. He'd been a little stronger then, still capable of group suggestion instead of just slight hypnosis. When Ridley had come for him then, he'd thought he was the luckiest boy in the world. Now he knew better, and it seemed the kids who had been watching him with such scorn had been the lucky ones. In a way, he was trapped in that orphanage forever, and it was still Ridley who held his freedom. He just had to make it through this cycle. He just had to make it through this group, and then he could go back to the real world. Ridley wouldn't want him for a while after that. He would forget the little doctor existed and let him go back to treating his patients in peace, making a sacrifice now and again when he found someone the Blacksite would want to know about. If he just kept repeating it, Nathan thought, he could almost believe it. It all started with the nightmares. Dex figured they'd been in the kindergarten for about 2 weeks, and things had been going well. Red band class got easier as Dex ate regularly and worked out daily. His body was becoming toned, strong, and he was catching up with Dick at an alarming rate. Despite being older than Dex, it seemed to gall Dick that Dex was bigger than him. Dex couldn't help it. He'd always been kinda tall, and the muscle made it even more obvious. He'd heard Dick floating the idea that Dex and Ryan might be more than just friends, but he seemed pretty careful to say it out of earshot of Dex or Cutter. Dex had known enough people who were scared of folks to know that despite being 2 years older than him, Dick was a little hesitant about finding out if Dex could fight or not. Masha, too, seemed to be thriving, and that made Dex feel a lot better about this place. Britt, Jenny, and Daniel now ate breakfast with them, all of them excitedly talking about what they were doing in class that day. Dex laughed at their lessons a few times, liking how it sounded more like play than work. Masha told him that sometimes they did an exercise similar to the telephone, where they would pass a message along and change it a little. Sometimes it got kind of funny, and Masha was barely able to tell them about it without giggling. Dex smiled at her stories, but it was hard not to notice the angry shadow eating not too far away. It appeared that Chandra, the platinum-haired bully of a few weeks ago, had not been having a fun time. For someone who had been such a catty asshole, she had really lost the most in this exchange. Her friends were now eating meals with her enemy, and the teachers had her playing second fiddle to a girl half her age. It was hard not to recognize that she was plotting something. The first time Masha woke up screaming, Dex thought it was just bad dreams. She was sleeping in her own bed now, no longer afraid of being alone, and Dex had been glad that she was settling in. She still spent her evenings with her two best friends, Dunstan and Dex, but she always went back to her bed when it was time to sleep. So when he heard her scream, he was up like a shot, weaving between the beds to get to her. He was afraid that Chandra had made her move, that Masha was being taken away by one of the minders for something strange and a little scary. But when he found her thrashing in her bed, he was almost relieved. She was clutching the covers, tossing and groaning, and he patted her head and tried to soothe her as those sleeping around her sighed and rolled over. Nightmares were something he could understand. Dex didn't wake up screaming, but it was only because he was used to being quiet. Every night he watched Wizard die, and every night he just stood there as it happened. He watched the red spread across his friend, watched it soak into his clothes, watched the life leave his eyes, and then Dex would wake up, only to fall into the same dream again. Some days he worked himself until he was exhausted, and those nights he didn't have any dreams. Those were the good nights, but they didn't happen often enough. He lay there with her that night, giving her what comfort he could, but it wasn't enough. She shuddered awake several times, but that was the only time she screamed on the first night. Dex was tired the next morning, but not as tired as he would come to be the next day. When he asked her about the nightmares, Masha said she couldn't remember them at all. She remembered being tired, she remembered being scared, but she didn't remember why. Just dreams, I guess. I've never really been prone to nightmares, but maybe it's all the brain stuff we've been doing lately. She started chatting with her friends when they came to join them, but Dex wasn't sure he agreed. He tried to talk about it with Dunstan, but he was no help. He looked like he had slept worse than Masha, and when Dex mentioned it, he made a lame attempt at a quip. Maybe she's been poking around in my head. There are definitely some things in there that could cause a few nightmares. When the bell rang a few minutes later, they all shuffled off to class, each looking less sure than the other that they wanted to go. Grab something that seems to speak to you, something that interests you. I want to see if we can get some solid data on your abilities today. Dr. Hammershoal had lined up some objects, and as Dunstan looked at them, he couldn't find a single one that he actually wanted to touch. There was a single Nike trainer on one end, a dirty brown rabbit toy that looked like it had been excavated from a ditch, a transformer that was currently in the shape of a pickup truck, and a frisbee that looked like someone had run over half of it. It wasn't just how they looked either. Dunstan could almost feel something coming off them, a kind of energy he didn't like, and it made him want to touch them even less. Doc, I don't really want to touch any of these. Come now, my boy, just a quick touch so we can see what we're working with. You want to know the extent of your powers, don't you? He did, but these tests had been getting weirder as the days passed. It had been bad enough when he was watching people's lives as their parents fought or people were mugged, but for the last 2 days it had been different somehow. Tuesday, he'd held a wallet that had belonged to a man that had been kidnapped. Dunstan had watched them take the wallet and then saw the man as he went into the trunk of their car. The little doctor had asked him questions after that, and Dunstan had been able to remember the license plate of the car and what color it had been. He told them, and then the next day, there had been a hat on the table. It wasn't a particularly special hat, it was just a battered old White Sox hat, but when Dunstan had touched it, he'd seen a kid about his age walking by the side of the road. The kid had been hitchhiking, Dunstan was almost certain, and when a station wagon with Detroit plates had picked him up, the hat had fallen into the floorboard when he passed out against the window. The kid had put it in his lap, his hands kneading it like a worry stone, and when the kid had been carried from the car into somewhere, the hat had been left behind. Dunstan thought it might have been a hotel or a resort or something, but he couldn't be sure. Now, there were more things, and Dunstan didn't want to touch them. The last two had been different somehow. Dunstan had seen bad stuff before when he touched things, but this was different. He got the idea that Hammershoal knew he would see those things, but now the game had higher stakes. Hammershoal looked interested when he told him about the kid in the station wagon and the old guy in the trunk of the car. He'd scribbled down information and told Dunstan he'd done very well. But Dunstan didn't think he'd been trying to test him. Dunstan suspected that he was using him to gain information. But for what? I don't know, he said. Sometimes I see awful things when I touch the stuff you bring in. I don't know if When the rabbit came sailing towards him, Dunstan stuck his hands out to catch it without much thought. He didn't want it to fall on the ground, no more than he wanted anything here to fall off the table, but he realized the trap the second he'd caught it. The second his fingers sank into the plush fur of the filthy toy, he knew he had made a grave error. Dunstan got a flash, and then more than he bargained for. He was walking up the street with a bag of garbage in one hand and the stuffed bunny in the other. No, that wasn't quite right, and Dunstan realized about a second before the kid got snatched that he was seeing things from the swinging perspective of the bunny and not the kid holding it. The garbage fell to the sidewalk, and the kid had a death grip on the rabbit as someone grabbed him up and threw him in the back of a panel van. It was the kind his friends at the group home had always called a candy wagon, with blacked-out windows and heavy sliding doors, and this one seemed to live up to the expectation. No candy, but there was a treat in the back for somebody. The kid cried a lot and clutched at the rabbit as the van rolled off. Dunstan could feel the tears soaking into his fur and wanted to do something. Is this what it was like being a toy? Standing by impotently as some kid who loved you got hurt or killed? If this is what it was like, Dunstan thought the characters in the Toy Story movie would need some pretty big therapy by the end of the series. They drove and drove, the kids' tears coming endlessly, but once they stopped, things got a whole lot worse. The guy opened the doors of the van, letting in light as the kid huddled against the back wall. The light was snuffed out pretty quick, and the guy grabbed the rabbit and tossed Dunstan into the corner as he went to work. Dunstan had a front row seat, the black button eyes seeing every cut and every scream. When the little hand reached out to grab him, Dunstan felt the kid pull the rabbit close as he wheezed out his final breath. Even in his last moments, he wanted the comfort that rabbit could give him, and when the man took him from the back of the van, he had a death grip on the grubby little toy. They went through the woods, the leaves crunching and the birds singing their hesitant song. Dunstan had seen a sign, Ridgeway Overlook, and when they reached the kid's final resting place, the killer had dropped him like he was nothing but a sack of garbage. The boy was dead, the rabbit slipping from his hand, and Dunstan watched as he dug the hole. He begged, he pleaded to be released from this, but it wasn't until the boy was under the earth that the hand gripped him and took him back to the van. He dropped him not far from the sign, as casually as he had the boy, and that was when Dunstan came out of it. Dunstan dropped the rabbit, letting it fall to the ground, and looked around in confusion. He realized that all that had happened in a matter of seconds, the memories having been imparted just as quickly as he'd reached for the rabbit. He looked at Dr. Hammarskjöld like the man had raped him, and to his credit, Dr. Hammarskjöld had the good grace to look sorry. What the hell was that? Dunstan was shocked to hear how unsteady his voice was. Did you see something? The little man asked. If you saw something, I need to know about it. How could you do that? Dunstan asked, wanting to curl into a ball and resisting the urge with great difficulty. How the hell could you do that? You had no right. You had no... What we do here, Dunstan, is bigger than you and I. We are providing a public service, as well as feeling out your blossoming abilities. Now, tell me what you saw. Dunstan told him, trying to keep his voice from shaking. But when Hammarskjöld told him that he had done well, and he could leave early, Dunstan made his way quickly to the bathroom and threw up. He couldn't believe what he had seen, and it was something that would stick with him for a long, long time. Dex was getting worried about his friends. Masha had been sleeping poorly for the last couple of days. Dunstan had been quiet ever since lessons on Tuesday. Dex had recognized Masha's problem right away, but had been slower to pick up on Dunstan's. Dex was starting to realize just how much of his attention he was giving to the program, and it made him feel kind of crappy. They were sitting in the game room one afternoon, Masha taking a nap on one of the couches as the boys watched cartoons on the big TV. Dex really liked this Adventure Time show, and he was a little jealous of the carefree Finn and his adventures in the land of Uwu. Dunstan was watching too, but he would periodically wipe at his eyes as he watched. crying sometimes, for no discernible reason. "You okay, man?" Dex finally asked him. "Yeah," Dunstan said, his voice watery as runners of snot slid from his nostrils. I don't know what it is, but it's all right. It'll pass. It always does." Dex watched him close his eyes, tears dripping through them, and gain control of himself before sighing deeply and fixing his usual smile back on. "Is it the training?" Dex asked. "Are they making you do stuff that hurts you?" Dunstan opened his mouth to respond, but didn't seem to have an answer right away. I don't really know how to explain it. I told you, I can see things, right? When I touch stuff, I mean." Dex nodded, Masha rolling a little bit as she tried to get comfortable. "Well, they've been giving me some stuff lately. Stuff I don't really want to hold once I have it." "What kind of stuff?" Dex asked. Not sure he wanted to know either, but trying to help Dunstan as best he could. "Kids stuff, toys and stuffed animals and things. At first it was just trucks and action figures and things I could make sense of, but lately it's changed. Today they handed me a stuffed rabbit, and I saw a kid get dragged into a panel van, and they killed him. Like..." Dunstan started crying again, and Dex wished he hadn't asked. "Dude, they really worked this kid over. Then they took him into the woods, and he died as this sick prick dug a hole and put him in it. I watched this kid watching this guy dig his grave. I don't know how to process that, Dex. I don't know what to do with this stuff. Stuff like this scares me. And when I get done, Hammarskjöld wants me to fill out a damn survey. A survey!" he yelled, and some of the kids got quiet as they looked at him. Masha woke up, looking scared, as she looked over at Dunstan. "Dunstan, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Dunstan had gotten off the couch, looking like he wasn't sure whether to run or sit back down. "I don't know," he finally told the little girl, and Dex thought for sure that he was going to take a seat again when something over his shoulder caught his attention. His lower jaw was quivering as he watched, and Dex turned to see what had caught him, and saw the news station talking about the remains of a child they had discovered. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but the news prompt said, 10-year-old case closed. Remains of Donovan Kyles found in New Hampshire woods at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The kid pictured couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, but it was the toy he was holding in the featured picture that caught Dex's attention. The stuffed rabbit was pretty jarring after what Dunstan had said, and when he looked back, the boy was bolting from the room. Dunstan came into Dr. Hammarskjöld's office like a bull in a china shop. The little doctor was seated at his computer, making notes on the day's experiments, and he jumped about a foot when the kid came barreling in. Dunstan looked mad enough to chew nails and spit staples, but Dr. Hammarskjöld resisted the urge to just push the button for the security people. He had expected something like this might happen, and it was best to get it out of the way. "What the hell? How did they know? How did they know?" Dunstan asked. "I'm guessing you're talking about Donovan Kyle," Dr. Hammarskjöld said. "Yeah, I fill out a survey after you practically shoved that filthy rabbit in my hand, and about a day later they just happened to find the kid? That seems pretty damn convenient to me." Dr. Hammarskjöld locked his computer and turned to give the boy his full attention. "It's not convenient at all, Dunstan. Many of the children in this program are used for such matters. Many of your friends in the group are given situations that they may or may not be able to tell the outcome of. Mark is being used to find suspects for various police forces through photographs, fingerprints, and footcasts. Anja is using photos to tell us who might be a potential security threat, though she isn't quite as helpful as you or Mark at the moment. So you see, this isn't just you. We all have our part to play in the grand scheme of things." "Yeah, Well, my grand scheme requires me to watch kids get butchered, and I don't much care for it, Dunstan said. Dr. Hammarskjöld nodded. I can see where that might be problematic. Would you like me to help you? Dunstan gave him an odd look and took a step back. Help me? How would you do that, exactly? Dr. Hammarskjöld pushed out his chair and offered it to Dunstan. I have a small talent with mental suggestion. I've helped many people your age forget things, lessen the blow of things, become less anxious about things. And I can help you, if you like. Dunstan hesitated, seeming divided over the idea of the little man helping him forget. But ultimately, he took a seat. In the end, Dr. Hammarskjöld reflected, they all decided to forget. Now then, count down from 10 for me. Once you reach 10, we may begin. Dunstan was much happier at dinner than he had been in days. He had most of the table in stitches with his quips, but Dex thought his smile looked a little phony. From across the cafeteria, Gerald thought the same, and there was something new as well. A new string linking them now. A purple one. This was the first time he had seen a purple string, and Gerald didn't like it in the least bit. Dunstan would need watching now, and Gerald hoped that he would be up to the task when the time came. Dex was up, looking for the source of the scream before he was fully awake. He knew who was screaming, and Dunstan was on his way from the other side of the room too, as the other kids started waking up. Masha was thrashing around, her covers snaked around her legs and arms, screaming as she fought against the imaginary enemies. The other kids were standing around, not sure what to do, but this was Dex's nightly routine at this point. He pulled the blankets around her, making her into a human burrito, and shushed her as he rocked. Dex was aware of how ridiculous he looked, but he didn't care. Masha wasn't getting enough sleep, and it was starting to show. I swear it's every night now, Dunstan said, sitting down next to him as he soothed her. She's gonna miss class at this rate if... Hey, you guys think you can keep your friend from screaming? Came a familiar snide voice. She's keeping all the normal people awake. They glowered over at Chandra, her bed still next to the little girl's, and she put her hands up and rolled over. Despite being kept up, Dex didn't think she looked all that tired. Chandra appeared to be getting enough sleep, despite the nightly screaming sessions, and that was surprising. Must be nice, he thought, to be able to function off a few hours. Catch some Z's done, Dex said. I'll lay with her tonight. You sure? You did it last night, too. I don't mind taking a shift. I'm sure. They just need my body for training. Your mind and her mind need to be sharp for lessons. Get some sleep. I got this. Dunstan nodded, heading back to bed as Dex tried to get comfortable in the little girl's tiny bed. The bed was hardly large enough for one normal-sized person, and Dex found it difficult to get comfortable with so little space. He was tired, but the frame pushed at him in painful ways as he tried to settle. Masha was snoring already, the nightmares gone, but Dex doubted this would be the last one tonight. Gonna come keep me company next, big fella? Chandra teased. I'm sure I could make some room for you. Dex gave her the finger and she rolled over, cackling like a hen as his eyes got heavy. The nightmares had started about a week ago, and they weren't getting any better. After 2 nights, Dex had suggested that she talk with the minders about it, but they were no help. They had suggested more activity before bed, changing her diet, even that it was a result of her powers beginning to grow. But their solutions offered nothing but more of the same. Dex didn't know what to do, but it was starting to affect everyone. He had seen some dark looks thrown Masha's way, and even their little circle of friends had cast unfriendly eyes on her. She let out a muffled moan as she shifted in her swaddling blanket, and Dex held her tight until she stilled. He had to get some sleep. Class started in 3 hours, and it would be another day of exercise. He was snoring before he knew it, and thankfully, Masha managed to sleep through the night. She almost cried as her hand struck the glass of juice and sent it spilling across the table. Dunstan couldn't even be mad about it, and they got it cleaned up pretty quickly. "I'm sorry. I'm so clumsy." "No, you're exhausted," Dex said. "You need to talk to the minders and get some sleep. You can't keep going like this." "You guys do," Masha said, stifling a yawn as she missed her mouth with a forkful of eggs. "You and Dunstan get up every time I have a nightmare, so the least I can do is push through this." Dex sipped the coffee he'd gotten, wondering if there was a way he could take it with him. He was better at hiding it, but he was just as tired as Masha. Dex was sort of used to being tired, though. So much of living on the street had been sleeping somewhere till they put you out, at least until they found the clubhouse. There had been periods where he would snatch an hour here, a couple of hours there, and then get back on the move again so the cops didn't catch them. "Do you remember what the dreams are about, at least?" Dunstan asked, not for the first time. "What's it matter?" Dex asked, trying to keep the exasperation out of his voice. "If we knew what caused it, maybe we can fix it." "Doesn't matter anyway. I don't remember them. It's like they come on so quickly that I just can't remember what they're about. I'm sorry, guys. I know this has got to be annoying." "It's cool," Dex said. "We'll get through this." The bell rang as they walked off, Britt and Jenny saying they would keep an eye on her. But Dex stopped Dunstan. "Need a favor," he said, Ryan waiting by the door for him as Dunstan looked at the bigger boy questioningly. "If you need me to sit with her tonight, you know That ain't it. I want you to talk to Dr. Hammarskjöld about her dreams." Dunstan's face scrunched a little more. "The little doctor? You think he can help?" "Man, I hope so. I'm getting pretty ragged, and I can see she is too. She needs some relief, some sleep, something, or she's going to start breaking down. We need answers. If he has them, then we need his help." Dunstan thought about it, nodding as he thought about the skills the doctor had said he'd had in his time here. "I'll ask," Dunstan said, and the two bumped fists as they headed off towards their daily trials. Rebecca winced as the scent of evergreen filled her nose. This was how they had decided to test her abilities, since she couldn't just manifest visions on demand. Well, this was one of them. It had started with different colors, then color patterns, sounds, a brain scan, certain words and phrases, more sounds, another brain scan, and now smells. They had a bunch of those plastic film canisters, and she was instructed to take the lid off and inhale deeply to see if it elicited a reaction. So far, nothing, but Rebecca was hopeful. If this didn't work, then the minders had mentioned chemical trials, and Rebecca was a little afraid that they would turn her into a zombie or a speed freak or something. She wondered if Dr. Hammarskjöld had anything to do with this, and that filled her with an old anger. The little doctor had been very careful not to get too close to her, and never to be alone with her. He could clearly see how angry she was at him, blamed him for her being here, and with good reason. It was his fault, she felt certain of it, and if she ever got the chance, she'd take that anger out on the tiny man. She coughed as the smell of cigarettes assaulted her, shaking her head as she tried to catch her breath. She'd had visions in the 3 weeks since she'd arrived, but they had been different from the ones back at school. Those dreams, or visions, or whatever, had been about her. These visions had been about the kindergarten. In them, she was like a ghost or something, floating around and observing people as they went about their day-to-day lives. She saw herself a few times as she walked with Gerald, and watching them move filled her with a deep and unquenchable hunger. It was strange to watch them walking, talking, thinking, living, and also feel the drool as it ran down your chin. "Anything?" asked the minder, making notes on her clipboard as Rebecca smelled. "Just a headache. Cigarettes always make me feel a little nauseous." She said, scribbling something. "Gerald, are you having any luck?" Gerald shrugged, not really sure what to tell her. "Not really. Strings are still there, and the blue one just stretches off through the wall." She nodded, flipping a page and making another note. Rebecca picked up another one and smelled. Yuck. Trash can water. She gagged a little as she put it down, not really sure what they were looking for here. "You know," Rebecca said, "sometimes there is a smell before it happens." "Yeah?" the minder said, looking intently. "It's like the smell before a lightning strike, I guess. It's hard to—" "Ozone?" I guess," she said, not really knowing the word. "Maybe that's something we can work with," the minder said, more to herself than Rebecca. Rebecca thought back to the dreams or visions she'd had last night, and wondered what the lady would make of those. It had been another one of those floaty dreams, but her course took her through the empty halls, as opposed to the full ones. She floated through the dark game room, the cafeteria, the library, and finally to the dormitories. She had heard the little girl screaming from the hallway, and when she came swooping in, she saw the little bundle of bedclothes writhing on her mattress. There was a red crown around her head, a dancing neon halo of terribleness, and she woke up suddenly to hear the little girl being comforted by her friends. Maybe it meant something, maybe it didn't, but Rebecca supposed there had to be something to it, or why would it show it? "Ma'am," Gerald said, and the minder looked up hopefully. "May I go to the bathroom?" Her face fell. "Yeah, Gerald, go ahead." He gave Rebecca a strange look as he left, but she put it out of her mind. Whatever he was actually up to, she supposed he would tell her later. She went back to her smells, hoping for one that would give her some control over this strange and often frightening ability. "Okay, Dunstan, what do you see?" "There's a field. He's playing baseball. No, not baseball. It's just catch. He and another kid are playing catch. The kid is his friend. No, it's more than that. They're dating? Boyfriends? I don't know, but he likes the other boy a lot." Dunstan hadn't really wanted to touch the glove, but as the vision started, he had slipped it on and was popping his fist into the pocket of the glove as he saw more. "They're kissing now. Gross. But they like it. They like each other, and to them, it's good. They have to be careful. If someone sees them, then they could be in trouble. But now someone has seen them, and he's shouting at them." "Who is it?" Hammarskjöld asked. "Who sees them?" He's a priest. No, a minister. He's a minister for the boys' church. The boys, Presbyterian. That's not right, but I don't know the word." "Presbyterian?" the little doctor supplied, and Dunstan nodded. Yeah, I think that's it. The minister, he's real angry. He says the boys are sinning, and he says they're going to burn in hell if they don't repent. The other boy, Micah. His name is Micah. He gets angry. He's bigger than the boy with the glove, 14 and muscled, and he walks over and pushes the minister. He threatens to hurt the minister. Father Gabriel is the minister's name. He pushes him down, telling him to leave them alone. Then Dunstan's eyes went far away, but Hammarskjöld jumped a little when he flinched. What happened? The minister, Father Gabriel, he shot Micah. Micah fell down, and he didn't get back up. The minister panicked. He hadn't meant to kill him, but now... Dunstan shuddered again, crying out as he popped his fist into the glove faster. He shot the boy with the glove, too. Then what happened? Hammarskjöld asked. He needed to know so he could get some justice for those boys. He buried them in the field. He buried them deep. The glove slipped off the kid's hand when he died, and the man who found it, he couldn't find them because they were buried so deep. They never suspected the minister. He showed up to help look, but he knew where they were all along. He knew why. Why didn't he tell? Why didn't he just tell? Dunstan was crying. His sightless eyes were weeping freely, and Hammarskjöld took the glove off him and threw it back onto the desk. Dunstan shook again and looked around, finally finding the little man as he wiped his eyes. I don't like this game. I never see anything nice. It's always terrible stuff. I know, Dr. Hammarskjöld said, but now I can get justice for those boys and make sure that man never hurts anyone else again. Won't do any good. There will always be another one. Another dead kid, another hurt person, another man just looking for someone to put in the ground. Dr. Hammarskjöld started to pat his hand, but thought better of it. God only knew what Dunstan could get if he touched him. Think of it as a service to the dead, then. That boy's family can have some closure, and he can be put to rest. Dunstan nodded. I think I need to visit the bathroom. Did you have anything else for me today? Hammarskjöld checked his watch. It was nearly lunchtime, and he shook his head at how time flew. It seemed he had just finished breakfast, but it was nearly noon, and they had solved 3 missing persons cases and 2 murders. Quite a day already. No, you can take the rest of the day off if you need to. Check with the minder and make sure there's nothing else. Dunstan nodded and left through the side door. Hammarskjöld had another of his experiments with the string boy, Gerald, later, and he was curious to see what could be made of it. They had tried some mazes, but the results had been mixed. He could avoid dangers well enough, but he couldn't follow the strings to any particular target. They really just seemed to lead him to his destination, but they were constant in that direction. Hammarskjöld saw no real utility in them, other than leading Gerald to whatever his final destination was. Hammarskjöld sighed. He hoped it wasn't leading him towards being just another item on this table, for Dunstan to read like a book of secrets. Gerald heard the door open and tried to pluck up his courage. The purple string was still firmly jutting from the door, and he could see it following the boy in the sneakers as he approached the urinal. It was Dunstan, it had to be, but he didn't know how to begin to tell him what he knew. Gerald didn't even know if he should tell him, but he knew it was information he needed. Gerald had heard something interesting, and he knew it would solve the problems Dunstan and his friends were having. He and Rebecca had been in the library yesterday when it happened. Rebecca was working her way through Eclipse, the vampire books that had her attention lately, and Gerald was looking for something to hold his own interest. The strings weren't much use when it came to picking books, and he was stalking the shelves when he overheard a conversation that the speakers were trying to keep away from the others. "Why don't you just say you're sorry and come be part of the group too?" someone was whispering. Whoever they were whispering to had scoffed. "Apologize? Apologize for what? She comes in here and thinks she's such hot shit. I haven't done anything to say sorry for." "It would bring peace, Chandra. You could come be part of our group instead of being alone all the time. We don't hate you, but you have to let go of this crap with Masha." "I don't think so. But when she kicks you both to the curb, I guess you can come be my friends again." "Whatever, Chandra. We tried to be nice, but if you're going to be like this, then we don't want to be any part of it." They had walked away, not even noticing him there, and when Chandra had whispered to herself, it was almost too low to catch. "See if you want to be friends with her when she's a drooling vegetable. A couple more nights without sleep, and she'll be nutso." Gerald had checked, and sure enough, The red string running towards her had let him know that the girl with the platinum hair was dangerous. He had thought about it long and hard, and now Gerald thought for sure that Chandra was the one sending the dreams. He didn't understand why, but he rarely understood why people did what they did. She was a bully, he supposed, and she really didn't need good reason. Chandra didn't like Masha, felt she had stolen her friends, and she meant to have them back, even if it cost a little girl her sanity. He heard the water running in the sink and realized it was now or never. He opened the door and found himself eye to eye with the boy, Dunstan having turned to leave as Gerald came out. Dunstan jumped a little, clearly not expecting anyone else to be in here, and laughed as he looked at Gerald's somber face. "Jeez, you scared me. I didn't know anyone else was in here. It's all yours if you need the sink. I was just..." "No, sorry," Gerald started, not really sure how to begin. "I was actually hoping to talk with you." Dunstan kept his smile in place, but it looked a touch unsure of itself. "Well, you picked a heck of a place for it. Must be pretty important to ambush a guy in the can." Gerald closed his eyes, collecting his thoughts before he blew this. This was important, maybe the most important thing he would do with his life, and he couldn't let it slip by. The purple string had him unsure of himself in a way that he rarely was, but he had to power through it. "I know something about your friend, the little girl, and why she's having nightmares." "Oh?" Dunstan said, his smile turning into something less than friendly. "Well, if you've got some idea, I'd love to hear it. I know she's keeping you guys awake too, but if it's another question about why we can't just gag her, then just..." "No," Gerald said. I think I know what's causing it, and I want to hear what you think about it." Dunstan nodded, opening the bathroom door and holding it open for him. "Just so happens I have the afternoon off, and given that you were skulking in a bathroom, I can assume that you don't have anything particularly pressing either. Let's take a walk. You can tell me all about it." He and Gerald went to the media room, Gerald telling him what he suspected, and Dunstan putting the pieces together. By the time the bell rang for lunch, Dunstan had a pretty good idea of what they had to do, foremost among them being taking Gerald to the lunch table, so he could talk it over with his friends. Lunch that day looked more like a war council. Rebecca was used to a big group around the kids that Gerald usually watched, but it took her a minute to realize that he was with them today. This explained where he'd been for the rest of the morning, she supposed, and he glanced up as she started to walk by with her pizza. She had intended to go sit in their usual place, not wanting to spoil his chances of getting into the little gang they had there, but Gerald called her name and waved her over before she could escape. "This is Rebecca," he said, as she squeezed into the offered chair. "She's a friend of mine." "The more the merrier," one of the kids said, and she thought his name might be Dunstan. He was in their class, but he usually went off with her least favorite doctor for private lessons, so she didn't often get to work with him. "This is Dex, Masha, Jenny, Brittany, Heather, Daniel, and Ryan, and I'm Dunstan," he said, bringing her up to speed on those assembled. "Gerald, our newest friend here, besides you, was just telling us something very interesting," he said, clapping Gerald on the back as he grinned at him. Gerald accepted it, though his returning grin was a little wooden. "I told them that Chandra was responsible for the nightmares that Masha had been waking up with lately." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? How did you come by that information?" "I happened upon a conversation I probably wasn't supposed to hear while we were in the library," he said, glancing at Brittany and Jenny, "though I didn't know between who until now." Both girls looked a little ashamed, Jenny shaking her head. "We didn't know that was what she was talking about. We just assumed that she would get over it and come be friends with everyone." "Chandra isn't the making friends type, it would appear," Dex said, fingers steepled before his face. "The question is, what do we do about it?" "We could tell Mrs. Cashmere," Jenny started, but Masha shook her head immediately. I get the feeling this sort of thing isn't punished. If I'm too weak to sense that she's the one giving me nightmares, then I deserve what I get. No, I think we have to handle this on our own." "How do we even know that it's actually Chandra anyway?" Heather asked, looking at Gerald distrustfully. "Maybe this guy is just playing games or something. We don't have any proof. Only he heard what she said after Britt and Jenny left." "That's true," Daniel said. "We just have your word, Gerald. I don't want to condemn someone on just the word of..." "The red stuff," Heather said suddenly, thinking she understood what the visions had been trying to show her. She suddenly had the attention of the whole table, and it made her wish that she'd just kept her mouth shut. "I get visions. It's my power. Dunstan, you remember, I told you guys on the first day of class that I had visions about things that may happen." Dunstan was nodding, and she was glad. She didn't dare ask Gerald if he remembered, because that would ruin her credibility. They were suspicious of him, so if she wanted to convince them of what she believed, she would have to go in alone. "Well, I've been having these weird dreams where I wander the kindergarten by night, and last night I heard Masha as she began to scream. I floated back in, and she had a crown made of red neon around her head. I guess maybe that was the nightmare, but it didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before." A few of them were nodding, but Daniel was clearly unmoved. You'll excuse me if I don't just take your word for it. I want Masha to get some sleep too. I want all of us to get some sleep, but we can't just go around lobbing accusations, no matter how unpleasant the target is. "Seems there's really only one thing to do," Masha said, looking unhappy about it, but resolved. "I'll have to meet her there." "Meet her where?" Dex said, not sure what she was talking about. "In my dreams. Now that I know she's attacking me, I can plan for it and set up defenses. If it's just dreams, then the defenses won't work, but if it's her, then she might have a nasty surprise tonight." The bell rang for afternoon classes, and they headed out, Dunstan moving easily into the trio of Rebecca and Gerald. It appeared that they had been accepted into the group, and as Dunstan and Gerald began to talk about something as normal as video games, Rebecca had to hold in the urge to say that she had told him so. He could have been part of this much earlier, but she supposed his strings had known something that he hadn't. They were running the obstacle course again, and it still took a lot of focus to pull it off, especially as tired as he was. The kindergarten's version of an obstacle course was 3 parts Ninja Warrior, 3 parts 90s game show, and 3 parts military training. The last part was a dash of masochism that seemed to hang around most of the red band training. Maybe that was Cutter's special edition, but whatever it was or wasn't, Dex knew 2 things. 1, that he was tired, and 2, that he was still making the other guys look like crap. Dex was pretty used to pouring it on and outrunning the police. You didn't last long on the streets if you couldn't dodge the law when the chips were down, and Dex had lasted longer than most. He had never used the brain blast on a cop. That was a great way to get a serious APB out on you, but he made it a point to know escape routes in an area he was going to stay in long term. They had never raided the clubhouse, but he was sure it was only a matter of time. The wall was nothing more than another chain-link fence to scale. The pit was just rooftops to jump between. The sandbags were pedestrians and bike messengers. The reflex board, the hurdles, the narrow alleys, they were all just one more part of his daily escape from pursuit. Dex glanced around, smiling as he watched Dick fall off the moving platform for about the 3rd time. For someone who claimed to have been a state champion, he was clearly struggling to get through the course. Dex had started out close to Ryan, trying to help the kid out, but Ryan had told him after a few slips that he wanted to do it himself. So, Dex had left him behind, and as he crossed the endpoint, he looked back to see that Ryan was a little ahead of Dick and his cohorts, but not by much. "It's always wild to watch you run the course, kid," Cutter said, coming up behind him to watch the others. "How do you do it so fast? Most of the kids we grab off the street are malnourished or barely capable of running. You move like we stole you from a junior ROTC event." Dex just shrugged. "The fact that you guys took me off the streets and not from police custody or a halfway house should tell you everything you need to know." It was weird, Dex knew, to talk about getting snatched off the street like that, but after a while it was probably easier than being mad about it. It was so normal around here, in fact, that many of them swapped stories about being taken like anecdotes at a party. Dex didn't hold it against Cutter. Cutter hadn't grabbed him, and even if he had, it was just a job. That was what they always said in mob stories, wasn't it? It wasn't personal. It was just business. "Maybe you could give them some pointers or something," Cutter joked, but Dex only shrugged. "Ryan would follow them, but the rest would go out of their way to prove they didn't work. They don't like me, and the feeling is kind of mutual." "Well, it's to be expected, I guess. Most of these guys won't even make decent minders when they wash out. You, however, have got a real future with the minders if you don't graduate." Dex wasn't sure how to take that and decided to just nod. "Do most of the kids join up? The ones who don't graduate, I mean." Cutter nodded. "Nearly all of them. Some of them leave, and it's hard to function out there, knowing what you know. They may resent the Blacksite for taking them, but it's harder out there. You know that. Here we have structure, order. Out there, it might as well be Lord of the Flies." "Do the ones who graduate join up too?" Dex asked, feeling a buzz of pride as Ryan outpaced the group and made it to the climbing wall. Cutter was quiet for a moment, and when Dex looked up, he saw the older man staring at the kids in a very different way. The guy looked like a Navy SEAL, a huge man who could have taken any of the kids and broken them, maybe any two of them over his knee. He didn't seem to be a man that was often afraid, and the look of mystified terror on his face was the scariest thing that Dex had ever seen. No, the graduates go somewhere else. Their mission is not the same as ours, Dexter." "Our mission, sir?" "I like you, kid. You got a yard of guts, but I don't really think you're graduation material. The eggheads that graduate are rarely wearing red bands. Red bands are the muscle core, kid, and they know it. 90% of their minders and snatchers come from the red bands, and I think you've got a promising future at it." "I don't know about that," Dex said, not even taking offense at the implication that he couldn't graduate. "I don't think I could ever snatch kids." Cutter shrugged. "I see the way you are with the smaller ones, the ones who need a friend. You can also be tough, which is something you need here too. You've seen how I can whip up the kids, but what you haven't seen is me have to get mean yet. I can be a real bastard, Dex. Don't doubt it. There are some people," he spat the words like it was bitter, "overseas who could attest to that. These kids need looking out for sometimes, though. And Dex, I think you'd be good at it." Dex opened his mouth, but Cutter shook his head. "You don't gotta say nothing. Just think about it, and keep an open mind." He walked away then, yelling at Dick to stop effing around, and Dex almost missed his chance. "Sir," he yelled, and Cutter turned back to look at him. "Yeah, I know the minders are supposed to keep the peace. You said so on your first day, but what happens to students who attack each other?" Cutter grinned, "Thinking of thinning the competition before they get to your level?" Dex didn't answer, let him think what he wanted. Fist fights, attempted murders, even poisoning are grounds for termination. If it's something more subtle, though, something like your friend there can do," he said, indicating Ryan, "then I'd say it'd be chalked up to just one of those things. This place runs by the law of the jungle. Only the strong survive. Some kids don't make it to graduation. Some of you kids leave with a little blood on your hands. Don't worry, though. You'll get fresh blood on the job." He walked off then, and Dex wondered exactly what he had gotten himself into. Masha was trying to concentrate on the lesson, but it was hard as she felt the push of angry bees against her skull. How had she never felt this before? It was so obvious now that she was aware of it. It was like losing a tooth and finding the hole. Now that she was aware of the energy pushing towards her, she couldn't not feel it. The energy you push out is best visualized when it's being formed. It takes the form that you choose, but it must be molded into what you need for your... Mrs. Cashmere was droning on and on about something, but Masha was hardly paying attention. All around her was a soft buzzing of placid energy, as the others let their minds wander too. If she reached out with her mind, Masha could feel what they were doing, but she tried to let them have their privacy. Sometimes she did it without meaning to. Touching that energy came to her as easily as listening, and that was how she had found out that Heather and Daniel were interested in each other. They weren't in love, but they liked each other, and they had done the thing that grown-ups did sometimes. They were being what her mother would call mushy right now, sending little mental love notes to each other as they tried not to stare at each other. Britt and Jenny were playing a card game in their head, something of their own invention, and Chandra, sitting way in the back, was attempting to break into her mind for some reason. Masha could already see the terrible things that she was pushing through her mental barrier, and it took a lot of effort not to cry. Why was she doing this? Masha had never done anything to her, and she was just being mean for no reason. Didn't seem to matter why, though. It was happening, and there didn't seem to be much she could do about it. Why not? The voice was strong, direct, a much older version of her own voice, and one that made her look up and take notice. It's your head. They're your dreams. Why can't you do something? It's your mind. You can do anything you want. Anything I want, Masha almost said out loud. As Ms. Cashmere droned on, Masha suddenly imagined her mind as a castle, something with big stone walls and a moat. The energy coming in was a strong wind, something that had been trying to blow down a shack, but was suddenly butting up against a high, strong wall. She felt an immediate end to the angry pressure on the back of her head. Glancing in her periphery, she saw Chandra's eyebrows knit together, her forehead dimpling, as she pressed out hard. Blow, wind, blow, Chandra said lightly. You can't get me. She turned back to the lesson, her defenses in place, and wondered what other surprises could be in place when the girl came poking around that night. She would be ready for her, that was for sure, and who knew what might be waiting. The middle box, Gerald said, pointing to the blue one. Gerald stuck his hand through the hole, the string coming off of it green, and found a candy bar. The green one, box 1, contained a bunch of broken glass. The orange one, box 3, contained a large black scorpion that flexed its stinger as the lid came off. Gerald nodded, seeing the test for what it was. The other two both contained orange strings, which would have sent him to the infirmary for sure. The tests that Dr. Hammarskjöld was conducting were becoming more and more interesting as time went on. Yesterday, he had asked him to pick a door. The first one had a red string, the second one had an orange string, but the third one had a less orange string than the middle one. The third door had contained a dog, one of the big ones that would bite, but Gerald had closed the door as it began to growl. The other two had contained a gun that was rigged to fire if he had opened it, and a hive of bees that had swarmed around the room. Before that, it had been more mazes, but Hammarskjöld was done playing it safe, it seemed. He wanted to test Gerald's ability, and he was willing to draw blood for it. What color were the other two strings? Hammarskjöld asked, making notes. Orange, Gerald said. Neither of them would have killed me, probably. Good, good. Next test. Gerald turned to find 4 boxes, a red one, a blue one, a green one, and a yellow one. They all had holes cut into the top of them. All of them looked benign, but Gerald hesitated before walking too close. They were all set up as if they didn't hold anything more dangerous than a paper cut, but all 4 had glowing red strings attached to them. The red thrummed, pulsing with danger, and Gerald turned back to the little doctor, raising an eyebrow questioningly. "Go on. Pick one." "There is no safe box," Gerald said. "Sorry?" Dr. Hammarskjöld said, looking up from his notes. "There's no safe box. All the boxes have red strings." "Interesting," he said, stroking his chin. "What would you normally do in a situation like this?" "Wait for one of them to change," Gerald said. "And if it didn't?" It's never happened before," Gerald said with a shrug. "Well, make your choice. Make your choice and be damned by it." Gerald started to refuse, but realized it wouldn't matter. He approached the boxes, listening and bumping them as he tried to pick the one that was the least likely to kill him. The red box contained something that rolled around, like a stone or something. The blue box emitted a loud and familiar rattle, and Gerald moved away quickly. The green box made a metallic sound, and Gerald thought he knew what was inside that, too. But the yellow one gave away nothing. It was heavy, like it had weights in it or something, and after pursing his lips, Gerald went to the red one and stuck his hand in. Maybe they had tried to trick him by putting it in the red one, knowing he would assume that that was the bad one. He pulled his hand out, but when he saw the strawberry, he dropped it like it was a poisonous insect. He turned to find Hammarskjöld holding out an EpiPen, and he breathed a little easier after the shot was administered. "Oh, it was a dirty trick," he said, feeling his throat contract. "I am extremely allergic to strawberries. Yes, we know. It's in your medical file, hence the pen." Gerald took a few deep breaths, trying to get his heart rate under control, and finally took a seat as his body warred against its desire to close his throat up. "So, what's in the other boxes?" "The first one was a strawberry, as you know. The second had a rattlesnake. The third held a bear trap, and the fourth held a small incendiary device that would have probably caused you to lose your arm and about half your face." Gerald gulped. The little doctor was certainly not playing around. "I would think something like that would have gotten you too," he said sullenly. But Dr. Hammarskjöld shook his head. "I would have lost some hair, maybe an eyebrow, but I put my chair well outside the blast zone." Gerald took a few minutes to settle himself before getting up and testing his balance. He had allergic reactions before, but they were never very fun. He had to be particularly careful at home because his parents didn't keep needles around for long. If it happened at school, then he was covered. But if he had an allergic reaction at home, he was likely to die before anyone noticed him. "Any more surprises today?" he asked a little more sulkily. "No, I believe that's all. Thank you, Gerald." Gerald picked up his candy bar, but stopped as he turned to the door. "I have a question, sir," he said, seeing the little doctor look up from his notes. "What is the protocol if a student is being harassed by another student?" Dr. Hammarskjöld thought it over. "Well, normally there would be inquiries made, but I'm assuming you aren't talking about out in the open bullying." Gerald thought about it and shook his head. "Well, generally the kindergarten operates under the rules of the jungle model. Weaklings don't graduate, and it's often up to the strong to weed them out." "And if a promising student is killed or made useless in the process?" Gerald asked, already figuring he knew the answer. Hammarskjöld only shrugged. "Only the strong survive. They would make a token effort at an investigation, but ultimately nothing would be done." "I see. Thank you for your honesty, sir," Gerald said, leaving the doctor to his work. Message received. They were on their own. So what you're saying is we're on our own, Dunstan said morosely. Sounds like it, Gerald said. He as good as said that we were free to rip each other to shreds, as long as we weren't too overt about it. Well, crap, Dunstan said, his can running dry as he drank from the bendy straw. The 5 of them were sitting in the media room, talking about what they would do tonight. Rebecca was reading eclipse, Masha was lost in thought, and Dex was pretending to watch TV, but Dunstan and Gerald weren't fooled. Something was on his mind, but whatever it was, he wasn't sharing. He'd been quiet through dinner, too, he and Masha both, but if Dex was lost in thought, then Masha looked like she was working on something. She looked like one of those kids who's glued to their tablet when they're working on something they're passionate about. A house in Minecraft, or maybe some kind of puzzle. We kind of figured it would be a lost cause, didn't we? Gerald asked, and Dunstan nodded as he hooked the empty can into the garbage can. It hit the rim, bounced off the wall, and fell in with an angry rattle. Dunstan pumped his arm in the air before turning back to Gerald. So, what can we do about it? Said Dunstan. Well, we can get some evidence. And do what? Dex said, seeming to come out of his thoughts long enough to shoot down theirs. They already said they wouldn't help, and I doubt she's dumb enough to write it in her journal. Yeah, but if I could get her hairbrush or something, Dunstan said, but Dex shook his head. It's still your word against hers, and they don't care. Then we hit her first, Dunstan said. We make her stop. We threaten her or beat her up. She's just a girl. We can... A, Rebecca said over the top of her book, that's pretty sexist. B, she's just a girl who can implant ideas into people's heads. What's to stop her from convincing all 3 of you that you're chickens or cows or something? It's going to be hard to defend your friend if you're all farm animals. Dunstan growled in his throat. Okay then, smarty pants, what would you do? Rebecca shrugged. Probably drug her. She can't do anything if she's asleep, can she? We could get our hands on some sleep medication and... Don't bother, Masha said, making the boys on either side of her jump as she came out of her very serious silence. I can handle this. They all looked at her, not quite believing. Then why has it gone on so long? Rebecca asked. If you could stop it, then why have you been letting her attack you? Masha fixed her old young eyes on Rebecca, and the girl shuddered under that unwanted scrutiny. Because I wasn't aware that it was happening. If I had known, I would have blocked her out. Now that I know, I can stop it. Rebecca looked unsure, but couldn't much argue with the girl's look of determination. So, is there anything we can do to help? Dex asked. I don't think so, Masha said. Just keep an eye peeled tonight in case of trouble. I don't know what will happen if I fight back, but I might not be the one screaming tonight when she comes to mess with me. Masha went back to staring into the middle distance, but her friends made a point to look away. The little girl had an intensity that was not altogether healthy. Chandra was washing her face in the sink when her ex-best friends came in. She smirked at them in the mirror, figuring this had something to do with the little brain trust she had seen gathered up at dinner. Maybe the little bitch had told them that she was using her gifts to hurt her. Maybe she had asked them to tell her to stop. Chandra didn't care either way. She wasn't going to ease off until the little bitch was as crazy as a porta-potty rat. You two got something on your mind? She asked, looking up questioningly. Say it if you do, but make it quick. I want to catch tonight's episode of Riverdale, and I don't want to fight for a good spot. Brittany opened her mouth, but seemed to think better of it. Jenny beat her to it. There's a rumor that you're messing with Masha. That's why she's screaming every night. Chandra turned around and leaned against the sink. So what if I am? Chandra, that's downright evil, Brittany said, looking shocked. Not only is it hurting her, but it's hurting everyone else, too. Yeah, that's kind of the point, Chandra said, looking at the two of them furiously. If the whole dorm is tired of being kept awake, maybe they should do something about it. Like hurt Masha? Jenny asked, putting her hands on her hips. Chandra blew a strand of hair out of her eyes. Were these two really here to try to guilt her into laying off? If that's what it takes. She's such a little thing. I don't figure it would take much. Maybe that big dumb brute who protects her will do it one night when he's tired of being kept awake. Maybe the blonde guy in the red band class. Maybe it'll even be one of you two. Doesn't matter to me. I'll sleep like a baby. My hands are clean. Both of them looked alarmed, and that made her laugh. Come on, ladies. Don't tell me neither of you have used your powers for something you want. Jenny, didn't you tell me you made that boy stop picking on you by convincing him that he loved you? Britt, wasn't there that girl who you... Stop it, Brittany said. We told you those things in confidence while we were swapping secrets. I don't even know why this surprises us. You told us about a couple of people you had messed with your little ability. Why should it be any different here? Chandra only shrugged. Exactly my point. Don't act like I'm the bad guy here. We all have a little blood on our hands, don't we? When I break that little bitch, it would be a good idea to come back and say you're sorry. Be an even better idea to fall on your knees and beg my forgiveness. Because once she's out of the way, maybe I'll decide that you guys are the problem. We'll stop you, Jenny said. We know what you're doing. We'll fight back. Chandra's laugh bounced off the bathroom walls like a super ball. That little girl has more ability in her little finger than you two have put together. If she can't stop me, then what hope do either of you have? You can't keep me out. I'll break either of you in record time. You can bow beside the throne or set yourself against it. That's your choice. She pushed through them, parting them easily as she went on her way. Her smile wasn't as certain as it could have been, though. The little bitch had stopped her earlier today, and she didn't know how. Her thoughts had butted up against something strong, stronger than the usual passive resistance, at least. She had hit a wall, and it had stopped her flat. She had gotten a brief image of a castle, but it was gone just as fast. Chandra had pushed at her a few times that day, but the result had always been the same. She let her thoughts slip away as she took the remote from some blue band girl and took her seat before the flat screen. She couldn't maintain something like that while she was asleep. Once she was snoring, Chandra would get back in, and tonight it would not be gentle. Chandra was tired of playing with the little bitch. Tonight she would break her. Tonight she would flood her mind with the sickest things imaginable, and the little girl would melt like a summer popsicle. By tomorrow, Chandra thought, as she watched Veronica lay out her latest plan for tonight's story, Masha would be a shaking pile of goo, and Chandra would be back where she belonged, as the queen of this little freak show. As she sat in the armchair, crossing her legs and watching primly, she felt like a queen. No, not a queen, she thought. She felt like the woman from Derek's comics. Derek, Dickie to his friends, was a little nerd like the rest of these kids, and he had a special place for comic books, despite how much her father hated them. She would have never said so. Comics were nerd shit. But her brother had been reading one at the breakfast table one morning when she had caught sight of a woman sitting amidst a group of well-dressed gentlemen. When she had asked who the woman was, Dickie had gushed endlessly about her. The woman was vicious, compassionless, and utterly set on her goals. If Dex liked to think of himself as Professor Xavier, then Chandra liked to imagine herself as Emma Frost, and tonight she would crush this wannabe Jean Grey and put aside her only true rival. Dex was coming back from brushing his teeth when Dick called his name. The boy was standing alone for once, but Dex had little doubt that his lackeys were lingering nearby. "What you want, Dick?" Dex asked, making the name sound like an insult. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I want to start over. It's pretty clear that you have the mettle for this, and I want you as a friend, not an enemy." "Uh-huh," Dex said, crossing his arms and looking at Dick skeptically. "So, why not come sit with us tomorrow for breakfast? We can all work out together, and you can hang with some like-minded people. What do you say?" Dex thought about it, weighing the other boy's sincerity and finding it lacking. Would Ryan be welcome to come sit with us? Dick laughed, like Dex had just said the funniest thing in the world. "That runt? Of course not. You gotta cut the fat a little, D. The kid's holding you back. You've got a lot of dead weight around you, in fact. Why not come hang out with us and get rid of some of that?" But Dex walked past him. He'd heard enough, but as Dick put a hand on his shoulder, it appeared he hadn't said enough yet. "Don't be stupid, Dex. You need friends in here, friends on your level. No one survives this place alone, I hear." "Last time I checked, 3 was less than 10, Dex growled, letting Dick know with his eyes that he needed to remove that hand. Dick must have gotten the message, because he took it off and folded his arms too. "I mean real friends, not dependents. Those kids are as good as leeches. You need people to watch your back." "From who?" Dex asked. "Seems like it's just you and your cronies who are making trouble." "You don't get it, do you? We're red bands, man. I've checked it out. Red bands don't graduate, Dex. Red bands join the brute squad almost 100% of the time. There have been 4 red bands to graduate in the whole history of the kindergarten, and we would be the 52nd class. Dex didn't bother to ask how he discovered this, but it seemed that Dick might not be as stupid as he looked. "This little speech got a point, or you just airing out your cheeks?" "My point is that we are going to be the snatchers and minders who come after them. Cutter's a snatcher. He makes no bones about that, and it's pretty obvious that they aren't just going to let us go once we're caught. None of your little friends are going to hit the road with you. Most of them won't even stick around to be minders. They'll leave you behind, Dex. You need some friends with some lasting power. Friends like me." Dex shook his head and walked off. "I won't make the offer again," Dick said from behind him. Dex snorted. "I'm not sure why you made it to start with," he said, moving off towards whatever fresh hell tonight brought. "What do you want, dwarf?" Cutter asked, leaning on his desk. Hammershoal pursed his lips. He hated Cutter, almost as much as Cutter hated him, he suspected, but he needed some information. As much as he despised him, Cutter heard things he wasn't supposed to hear, and Hammershoal had a sneaking suspicion that he was one of the few non-washouts to know what lay in paradise, the reward that awaited after graduation. If he did, he kept it to himself. People with big mouths seem to get silenced around here. "Information. I have reason to believe that a student might be in trouble." "Gosh, you don't say," Cutter said, putting a hand to his cheek in false amazement. "It's almost like they live in a nut house. Charles Xavier's home for dangerous kiddos." Dr. Hammershoal did his best not to look amused. "I just need your information, not your comedy." Cutter wiped his nails on his scrubs, looking like a carnival barker at Coney Island. "You know, information around here doesn't come cheap, short stuff. What do you got to trade?" Hammershoal tried to keep the disgust off his face. "You're a sick man. Do you know that?" Yeah. Stop doing your impression of my ex-wife. Show me what you got." Hammershoal hated it, but he had already expected something like this. He reached into his desk and took out a garment that Dunstan would have recognized very well if Hammershoal hadn't made him forget about it. It was red, white, and blue, a Ralph Lauren polo, the kind you could pick up at Goodwill for a couple of bucks. This one, however, was special. The last owner had been evaporated from the teeth up by a sniper, While he shot at a diplomat in Philadelphia about 10 years ago. There was no way that Cutter could have known that, but his eyes lit up when he saw the shirt like a kid on Christmas. "Ah, I can smell it. Gimme, gimme," he said, holding his hands out for the shirt. "Information first, then you get your prize." Cutter blew out like a horse. "Spoil sport. Okay, what is it specifically you want to know?" Hammarskjöld blinked at him. "Is there more than one student planning violence on another?" Cutter laughed. "Little man, there are 20 kids here. The world only had 4 people before one of them felt that was too many, so you can imagine how bad it is here." One of the blue bands, Gerald, asked me about a student who might be planning to attack another student. The boy does not seem particularly inclined to violence, so I'm wondering who he's talking to. Cutter's smile faded, and he looked thoughtful for a change. Hammarskjöld didn't like it. It was like watching an animal trying to figure out a lock. "Just so happens that one of my boys asked me the same thing. Dexter was curious about what would happen if 2 students fought, and what the staff would do about it." "What did you tell him?" Hammarskjöld asked, and winced as the smile returned. "That the laws of the jungle rule here, and as long as no one caught him, there wouldn't be any problems." Hammarskjöld nodded. He knew this Dexter, by reputation if not by sight, and that narrowed the field a little. Dexter had a group around him, a mixture of bands that made up nearly half the students, and if they were planning violence, that could be bad. "I need more than that if you want this. I need something definitive that I can take to Security Chief Ripley." Cutter thought about it. "Dick and his little group clearly don't like Dexter or his friend Ryan. There's some green band coos who hates the little girl in that class. Can't say I blame her much. That bitch is smarmy. Other than that, usual squabbles. There really isn't much. This class is sickeningly harmonious." Hammarskjöld nodded. Dex palled around with a lot of green bands, and some of the blue bands, too. It had been hard to miss the fact that Gerald and Rebecca had been with him today. It still hurt him a little to see the hatred on Rebecca's face when she saw him, but he supposed it was to be expected. He had betrayed her, and he made it a point to never be alone with her. "Okay, as I thought," he said, tossing the shirt to Cutter. Cutter buried his face in it, and Hammarskjöld tried not to cringe. "No matter how much they wash it, no matter how much they try to get it out, the scent of death always lingers, and it's sweet indeed." Masha was nervous as she slid under the covers, but confident that she could do this. Her castle had grown, her defenses were set. She was ready to do battle. Dex had tried to sit with her, Dunstan too, but she had told them to go get some sleep. Dex, her knight in shining armor, was looking a little ragged these days. He needed sleep, and she felt bad that he had been the one keeping up with her. She knew he needed rest, and hopefully he would get it tonight. She was going to stop this intruder, or die trying. Dunstan, well, she hated to say it, but he was more like a jester, but not in a bad way. Dunstan lifted her spirit when she needed it most. He too had been looking a little odd these days, like he knew something, but couldn't quite tell you what it was. Both of them were looking bad, and Masha wanted to help them. Tonight was the night. It was do or die, and Masha grinned as she tried to quiet her mind. Chandra had no idea what was waiting for her, and that was Masha's advantage. Chandra may have thought that she was going to toy with Jean Grey, But she was about to step into Mojo World. Let the games begin, Masha thought, with a yawn as she drifted off. Rebecca kept an eye on the little girl as she got herself ready to sleep. There was something different about her, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She seemed resolved in a way that Rebecca couldn't have said she would have been able to mimic. Rebecca would have been scared out of her mind by the idea of someone breaking into her head after lights out, but Masha seemed no more worried than she would have if someone was borrowing sugar. "She'll be fine," someone said, and she was unsurprised to find Gerald looking at her from the next bed over. "Creepy crawly," she growled. "How do you even know what I'm thinking about?" "Because it's what I'm thinking about too. I imagine it's what all of us are thinking about tonight." Rebecca lay back, pulling the covers up to her chin. She was worried, but she didn't know why. She had just met this little girl. She had just met all of them, but she felt close to them in a way that she couldn't explain. She had never heard of the camaraderie sometimes discovered by individuals when they're incarcerated together, or the sudden bonds felt by soldiers when they undergo training, but it would have made a lot of sense. They were prisoners here, soldiers in the same way, and the bonds they had made were as strong as they were sudden. "I wish there was something we could do for her," she said into the cuffs of her sheets. "Pray for her, I guess," Gerald said, and Rebecca laughed. She couldn't help it. Prayer was the last thing she had expected from Gerald. "I didn't know you were so religious." "I'm not, but in this case I don't see any harm in it. This is something she has to do on her own, it seems. And I seem to recall from the short amount of time that I was in Bible school that God loves an underdog." Rebecca thought of David and Joshua and Daniel and decided that he might have a point. She sent a little prayer before going to bed and just hoped that God could hear her in a place like this. Chandra closed her eyes as she lay in her bed inside the dorm and opened them onto a medieval time. "What the hell?" she breathed, standing outside the walls of an imposing castle. As she approached, a trumpet sounded from somewhere inside, and a guy in Renaissance fair gear came up to the top and unrolled a scroll. "By decree of Lady Masha, rightful lord of this castle, all trespassers are hereby ordered to vacate post-haste or be dealt with severely." He rolled up the scroll again and disappeared, leaving Chandra to look at the faraway castle and wonder. This was very different than the landscape she usually found here. Normally it was so disjointed. Dreams about school, dreams about theme parks and play parks, or cartoonish dreams that were more than a little abstract. She could warp and corrupt these dreams, turning them from something fun into an absolute nightmare. But the landscape was rarely this cohesive. The little bitch had been expecting her somehow. Well, that was fine. Chandra didn't need her permission to mess things up. She extended her thought towards the wall, meaning to turn it into marshmallow, but the walls stayed intact, made of thick stone. Chandra furrowed her brow and sent a new thought towards them. She would turn them into glass and break them into pieces. She would smash the little bitch's wall into pieces then, and she would... The walls were still stone. Chandra gritted her teeth, but she wasn't out of tricks just yet. If this was how the little bitch wanted to play, then that's how they'd play. Chandra summoned an army of soldiers in the empty field before the castle. These were no tame fantasy knights either. Chandra had imagined some rough and rowdy mercenaries from the fantasy novels she used to read. These were real headcrackers, and she had no doubt that they would make short work of whatever the little bitch girl had mustered up. Instead of the drawbridge coming down, though, Chandra saw the walls fill with catapults and bowmen who rained down boulders and arrows on her men. No problem, Chandra thought, summoning up a bunch of horsemen and giants to get in close. The giants came in to bang on the walls, sending some of the archers falling, but when they started dumping oil on them, they stumbled away and started batting at their burning skin. Chandra was getting frustrated, so she summoned a bunch of men on bats to fly over the walls to finish them up. They were met by a bunch of Pegasus riders, and there amongst them was the little bitch girl. She was dressed like a warrior princess, stabbing the bat riders with her spear and sending them falling to the ground. She moved her Pegasus riders with expert skill, and Chandra summoned more of the bat riders to combat them. Chandra summoned dragon riders, manticores, and all sorts of terrible things, but the archers just shot them down. The catapults scattered others like bowling pins, and the warrior princess and her Pegasus riders did for the rest of them. Chandra realized that she wasn't being diverse enough, only focusing on one spot at a time, and she was growing frustrated with the girl's ability to put her aside. The dragon that rose from the forest was huge, smog incarnate from all those nerd movies her brother liked, and Chandra rode on its back like a flea on a dog. The bats and Pegasus scattered, but not the girl. Chandra made the dragon breathe fire at her, but she dodged nimbly aside and drove the spear against the underside of the dragon. The hot breath came on regardless, slagging the wall and sending the defenses tumbling onto the ground troops. Chandra didn't care. She didn't need them anymore. She had the girl right where she wanted her, and the combat between the two of them was just fine. The dragon swiped at the Pegasus, but the nimble creature easily avoided it as the little bitch looked for a hole in the dragon's armor. Good luck, Chandra thought. There were no holes in this dragon. She'd be hard-pressed to bring it down with just her little spear. When the dragon swerved in midair, Chandra thought she had her. The tail whipped around directly in the path of the flying horse, and it would have knocked the little bitch girl off if she hadn't jumped over it and landed just as easily on her horse again. The dragon sucked in breath to breathe fire, and as the gout raced out, the Pegasus banked out of the way, losing only a few burnt feathers for the maneuver. She went right back to jabbing at the dragon's underbelly, and Chandra had to admit that she was persistent. "Jab all you want, little bitch. His armor is impregnable. You'll never—" But when the dragon lurched suddenly, Chandra knew that she had overestimated the beast. It started to drop, blood oozing from the wound on its chest, and as it fell, Chandra summoned one of the bats for herself and jumped off. The girl had been waiting, it seemed, and as she came in, Chandra gave herself a sword and a shield to hold her off. The tip of the spear skipped off the shield, but as Chandra chopped at her with the heavy old sword, the girl was already gone. The two of them fought, colliding and breaking again and again, and when the girl took the bat Chandra was on through the membrane of its wing, Chandra managed to land it safely before trading her longsword for something a bit more comfortable. The rapier was similar to the ones that she had used in her fencing classes, maybe a little more ornate, and she stood glowering at the little girl on the winged horse, shouting her challenge up at her. "Coward! Come fight me on the ground like a real warrior!" To her surprise, the little bitch landed. She donned a shield, a small one that fit over her arm, and as she approached, she looked as stoic and ready as a 6-year-old in armor could. Was she taller? Chandra didn't know. She thought she was, but it was honestly hard to tell. The way she held that shield and spear made it look formidable too, and Chandra wondered if she knew how to use it. She had been cutting down her warriors with relative ease, but most of that was pretend. All of this was pretend to one degree or another. That was all these mental battles were when you came down to it. Who had the best mental acuity? Who had the most vibrant imagination? Or who could think their way around their opponent? Chandra, despite her age, had a very healthy imagination, and she had been cultivating it for as long as she could remember. This was what it was all about, mental combat to one degree or another, and she would give the little bitch girl her due, because she had made her fight for every inch today. The girl was strong stronger still now that she was aware that someone was playing in her mind. But it didn't matter. Chandra had fought like this before against people whose imagination made this one look weak indeed, and she had always won. This contest would be no different. They squared off, the girl smirking as Chandra tossed her shield away and took her stance. "If you leave now, I promise I won't hurt you," the little bitch girl said. Chandra almost laughed, but instead she lunged forward, grinning as the girl barely got her shield in line to block the blow. She had her spear up like some kind of pint-sized Spartan warrior, and when she thrust, Chandra put it aside easily. Her retort was quick and precise, but the girl twisted away and thrust again. Chandra put it aside too, taking her time as she felt out the girl's skill. It didn't take long. The girl had clearly never used a weapon before in earnest. Her knowledge of fighting was from movies or video games, and she was clumsy with the spear. But not the shield. The shield was always in the way, blocking her shots when they came clanging in. But each block was slower. Her arms were clearly getting tired, and Chandra supposed that she should have done a few more mental jumping jacks. The kid had skill, but she was scraping the bottom of the barrel, and that was clear. When the first slice rode high on the shield and cut her arm, she cried out and tried to retreat. But there was no retreat from Chandra's blade. She slammed at her, smacking at the shield and sending it jittering this way and that. Finally, her arm fell too low, and Chandra put the tip right into her shoulder. It bounced, but only a little. The spear tried to come up, but Chandra backhanded it away contemptuously. The spear went flying, and Chandra put the point of the rapier into the girl's other shoulder and smiled as she cried out in pain. The flutter of wings and the cry of a horse was all the warning she got before the Pegasus tried to kick her in the face. It flew in front of its rider, hooves pawing at the air, but Chandra got tired of the game. She backed away a little, putting her hand behind her back as she got some distance between herself and the Pegasus. She had liked Pegasi since she was a kid. They had always been her favorite mythological creature, but this one was a bit too close for comfort. She pulled the handgun out from behind her back, the shape similar to the one her father had taught her to shoot, and put 3 rounds into the creature. One of them hit it square in the forehead and dropped it like a sack of grain. Then she stepped over it and leveled the gun at the bleeding girl. "You broke the rules," the girl said wetly, coughing up some blood as she stared into the gun's barrel with more bravery than she had any right to. "Sue me," Chandra said, debating whether she wanted to shoot the kid or stab her with the sword a bit more before she died. "I must say, I'd expected more from you. The way the teachers go on about you, I would have thought that you'd have been harder to kill. You know, however, that once I kill you, your persona here, I mean, you'll pretty much be brain dead. You knew that, right?" "I guess," the girl whispered, still staring down the barrel of the gun. "Well, aren't you a smarty? Let's see what all that smarts looks like, splattered on the ground." She almost shot the kid on accident when she smiled at her, not understanding what the bitch had to smile about. She had lost. She was going to die now. Chandra had won. What the hell did this little girl have to be happy about? "That's why I cheated too," she said, and when Chandra squeezed the trigger, she fell over dead. But the world didn't immediately go dark. The medieval times thing persisted, and she glanced around in confusion. This wasn't right. Something was amiss. What had the little bitch said before she axed her? She had cheated. Cheated or not, this all should have collapsed when she died. So what exactly had she... The thing that hit her in the back sent the rapier and the gun flying in either direction. Chandra was thrown forward, falling across the dead girl as she tried to get control of her limbs. They didn't seem to want to obey her. jittering and convulsing as she lay in the dirt and blood. She turned her head as a shadow fell across her, trying to see who it was, and her eyes went wide. It was her. It was the bitch girl, and her hands were crackling with lightning. You cheated, she stammered, her jaws clacking as she tried to speak. Sue me, she retorted, mimicking Chandra's words perfectly. How? She asked, her hands grasping for the shield, but unable to grab it as her fingers clutched feebly. I simply let you see what you wanted to see. You wanted to see me on the battlefield, so that's what I gave you. You wanted to kill me, so that's what I gave you. I let you come all the way to the end, only to stumble at the finish line. Did you have fun, Chandra? Did you enjoy killing me? Chandra nodded, feeling some of her control come back. Good. It'll be a high note for you to go out on. Masha opened her hands and let the lightning arc into her rival. She was a wizard, a spell slinger, and she let the magic fly. Chandra had thought the girl was at the bottom of her imagination, but Masha had just been getting started. She shocked her enemy, putting enough energy into it to electrocute 100 death row inmates. Chandra bucked and smoked, her clothes catching fire and her skin beginning to melt. Her eyes burst in their sockets, her eardrums popped, and her mind unraveled. All her anger and hatred dribbled out of her like spit from an open mouth. Masha stood over her as she died, inside her own head, and she could find no pity for the girl. After all, it was Chandra or Masha, and even at 6, Masha knew it couldn't be her. When Chandra didn't get up for breakfast, no one much noticed. When she wasn't at her first class, the teacher had a minder go down to check on her. The minder returned a half hour later, whispering something to the teacher that made her gasp. Students, I'm afraid to report that Chandra will no longer be joining us. She was discovered this morning in a catatonic state. She's been taken to the infirmary, but it's unclear at this time whether she will ever come out of it. They will likely send her home so that she can live out whatever is left of her life with her parents. There are sometimes side effects of using mental powers. Too much strain on the brain can cause aneurysms, and worse, so be mindful of how much you use your special gifts. The class was a twitter with quiet talk, but Masha didn't join in. She had vanquished her first opponent and lost a part of her innocence along the way. She didn't feel bad. It was the way of the world, after all. Only the strong survived, and now Chandra knew who was the stronger.